Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching 6th part of What If Naruto Becomes Curse of Hatred. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
It looked like two cloaked figures were hanging out in the forest, waiting for two people to join them. They were sitting on some big rocks that were easy to sit on. They were surrounded by bushes, trees, twigs, branches, and bugs and other pests that no one wanted to be around. As the waterfall crashed into the water, they could only hear the sound of war drums riding off into battle. That's right, the water was so clear that you could see every little detail in the shape of the water. But the water itself was full of trash and litter that was making it look a little dirty by turning it a brownish color, like someone had thrown up in it. Some people might not think much of it and say, just clean the water. But the ninjas who lived near the water would look at it with disgust, revulsion, and maybe even repugnancy. Two people were waiting on the rocks by the water. They were wearing black cloaks with red clouds on them. One of the men was very tall, and most of his face was hidden by a black mask and a white hood. The only things that could be seen were his eyes and the bridge of his nose. On the mask, there was a scratched out symbol of Takigakure, which meant that he had broken his promise to his village. He was also muscular, and his shape made him look like he was in his prime, but that was just a trick of the eyes. The man was much older than people thought. What scared people the most about him were his eyes, which had pink sclera and green irises without pupils. He had tan skin, and if you rolled up his sleeve, you could see stitches on his arm. He also had dark red nail polish on his left middle finger and a ring on it that said, North, in kanji. The other man was not as tall as his partner and had less clothing on. His silver hair was long and slicked back. It reached the back of his neck. When his cloak was opened, it showed that he wasn't wearing a shirt. His pants and shinobi sandals were the only things he was wearing. He also wore a hitai aid of Yugakure with a vertical slash through it, just like his partner, to show that he was no longer loyal. He wore his headband around his neck and hung an amulet of an upside down triangle wrapped in beads around his neck. He had dark green nail polish on and an orange ring on his left index finger that said, 3, in kanji. He was also spinning a scythe with 3 blades around like it was a trophy, cutting the air with it. From his body language, it was clear that he was very impatient. The thing he was waiting for still hadn't come, and with each passing second, he became more and more impatient. His left eyebrow would occasionally twitch in frustration at the long wait. He would trade his current manifestation for counting the money he had on him while his partner read a map. He was also silently hoping that the people he was waiting for would show up. The man with silver hair asked no one in particular, when are they going to get here? As he turned his triple bladed scythe around. It's been hours. The man's partner said, we just got here 10 minutes ago. Besides, we would have actually arrived earlier if we didn't pick up the bounty on the way here. Hidan said, you and your money. You know there's more important things in life. He said this in a rude and angry way. Without taking his eyes off the map, Kakazu asked, such as? He wasn't really interested in the answer because he knew what Hidan would say, but he forced himself to look like he was following the ways of Jashin. Hidan yelled out to everyone, which made Kakazu hold back a sigh. As if you can talk. You and your stupid and pointless rituals is what wastes our time the most. I don't even see the point in religion when you worship an imaginary figure and pretend he's a god. Money and wealth is the only thing that truly matters and you can only rely on money. Kakazu argued, hiding the map in his cloak. Why you? I should kill you. You blasphemer. The way of Jashin is the purest form of one seeking enlightenment through the slaughter of others. And money doesn't matter when you're dead, and besides we're always late because of some bounty you want to collect. Killing for a purpose other than just killing is disrespectful to Jashin, and with death you can savor it, feel the pain coursing through you is almost like ecstasy. Hidan replied, thinking about all the times he caused hurt on others and enjoyed every moment. Kakazu laughed at his partner and looked down his nose at the Akatsuki member. It doesn't matter if you kill for a religious reason if you don't get anything out of it, like money. For any kind of murder, killing for money was the best reason to do it. Since Ryu and Konan were going to be here soon, Kakazu said, well, it doesn't matter. We can get on with this mission and get the money. He said this while sitting on the rock. Hidan snarled at him and looked out at the lake. He didn't want to meet Ryu in person. Just like Kakazu, he was a blasphemer who spoke badly about his god and religion. Hidan thought that both Ryu and Kakazu should die for that alone. Kakazu had never met Ryu Yokazi and didn't have any positive or negative feelings toward him. However, he knew he would get along better with Ryu than with Hidan because at least Ryu wasn't a religion. Crazed sociopath who did time tabling rituals just to annoy him. This will also be one of the few times he has met Conan in person because it was rare for the whole organization to get together in person. For a moment, he wondered if Ryu and his partner got along, or at least could handle being around each other. Without a doubt, Kakazu would say that he hated Hidan and would much rather be paired with someone else. If Kakazu could kill Hidan, he would kill the man with silver hair one day and laugh while he did it. Kakazu also felt uneasy and angry when he thought about going back to Takigakure, the village that had betrayed him. He agreed to do a job that his bosses gave him a long time ago. Kill the Shodem Hokage, who is the world's strongest shinobi. Kakazu could still hear the praise being given to the legendary shinobi, who was like an army in person. Sendai Hashirama. Even though Kakazu knew the mission was dangerous and had a low chance of success, he did what he was told and tried to kill the director of the Senju organization. He was pretty much a mess after the battle, though, because he almost died from blood loss soon after, and he had to go back to his village in a mess. He wasn't praised or thanked for coming back alive and mostly intact, even though the odds were against him. Instead, he was severely punished and made to feel bad about his failure, which wasn't entirely his fault because the first one was even stronger than Kakazu had thought. As they turned their backs on him and kept reminding him of the failed mission, his hatred for his home grew. In a fit of rage, Kakazu killed the elders of the village that had almost killed him and stole many kinjutsu from them, including his signature jutsu, which made him look like he had been stitched up. Now he had to go back into the pit of dogs because he had to do something else. They were all cocky jerks, though, and Akatsuki knew that he wouldn't enjoy his time in Takigakure because they were getting paid so much for their services. Such as Hidan. In a different place, two people were sitting in a dark room with only a single stray light bulb hanging from the ceiling. A scroll with the kanji word for human on it was under the light. One of the attackers had dark, spiked golden hair and blood. Red eyes that could make anyone feel cold. The other person had beautiful ocean blue hair and amber eyes that sparkled like gems. So he's in that scroll? Asked the person with blue hair and a woman's voice. The other person simply replied, yes. So what are you going to do with him? Since you kept him alive, he must be important to you, the woman asked her tired partner, trying to figure out what he was thinking. There was a fight between them and an assassin who was living in that scroll and had been told to kill the blonde. She thought that maybe there were other men out there like this one who were looking for her partner and leaving him sunk. Smart of you to notice, the blonde said as he kept looking at the scroll. The man in the scroll is Sogeki Bareru, if you haven't heard of him. A third shinobi World War veteran and among Iwagakure's strongest shinobi and contender for the title of Tsuchikage. It leaves little to the imagination that he was assigned the mission of killing me, wouldn't put it past the old Tsuchikage to eliminate threats to his village. If Onoki would send Sogeki, that clearly means that right now he is being annoying, sending a single dog to hunt a wolf. Spoke the blonde with a hint of disdain in her voice. The woman asked, but still, what are your long-term plans? My right eye is very powerful, one of my Kamiyonenyo allows me to assume control and dominate the minds of those I choose to enslave. Even if his mind was to resist, his body would be under any and all manipulation, and once the link between my eye and their mind is created, it's impossible to break or fight back against the manipulator. The blonde explained her skills. But in the long run, he will work as a sleeper agent inside Iwagakure, where he will, among other things, store information about the clan's secrets and military strength. That's your answer, Conan, the blonde told the blue-haired woman, revealing herself to be Conan. So you're going to put sleeper agents in all the major hidden villages, right? Conan asked the blonde man known as Ryu, who was actually Naruto Uzumaki, son of the Yondaime Hokage, last of the Uzumaki clan, and student and heir of Madara Uchiha. He looked at her with Sharingan eyes that were only half closed. He didn't say anything, just stared at her. People could sometimes confirm what you think with just a glance in the eye. Conan didn't need to say anything. Just what are you planning with the hidden villages? I'm not fooled by the excuse of information gathering, as you claim your plan to be. No matter what it is, I'm not going to lie to you about it, Rai said, pulling his eyes away from her. He still didn't trust her, even after giving her his most valuable thing, his original Sharingan eyes. She narrowed her eyes at him. While she knew she should sigh, she didn't because a part of her was ready for that answer. No matter who he was, Ryu, Naruto, or Madara, he liked living alone and walking his own path. As Naruto walked under the light, his bright red cloak with the cloud design on it undid a small knot of twine that was wrapped around the scroll and spread the paper out. There were seal arrays in the middle, each with the kanji character for human in a circle on it. The scroll was where Sogeki was locked up. Naruto used a single hand seal to open the scroll and reveal Sogeki. A puff of smoke made the blonde take a small step back. When the smoke cleared, the battered body of Sogeki could be seen. He had cuts, bruises, and his hair was all messed up, and his eye patch was gone from when they sparred. Sogeki looked sleepy, like he had just woken up from a long sleep. He couldn't make out what he was looking at because his vision was blurry. When his eyes cleared, all he saw was a statue-like figure with blonde hair and red eyes staring down at him. It was almost like a god was staring down at him. When Sogeki realized that the person staring at him was Ryu Yokaze, he jumped to his feet, his vision turning red, and his anger growing. He was ready to punch Ryu in the smug, emotionless face with his right arm. As the Iwagakure shinobi's fist slowly moved toward Naruto's face, time slowed down for him. With just a few centimeters to spare, his fist stopped right in front of Naruto's face. Sogeki was shocked when he looked at his extended right arm and saw that it was paralyzed and couldn't move or react to his body's commands. When he looked back at Ryu, he saw that his right eye didn't have the usual Sharingan pattern on it. Instead, it had a pattern that made him feel scared. It had 3 sides with points on the backs of them. In the middle of the eye, there was a black pinwheel pattern that went around the pupil and read concentric tomo. The pupil wasn't in the shape of a circle like most pupils are, but rather a red shuriken with 3 points. Kami-yonaniyo. Tekken Saibutsu Senshikote, Kami-yonaniyo, Iron Fist subjugation of the Tyrant Emperor, was what Naruto was using at the moment. The eye had to be trained on a person for a certain amount of time in order to control them, but once they were under its control, Naruto could control them at any time by mentally telling Sogeki's arm to stop. Sogeki's right arm was broken with little effort by Naruto, who grabbed the arm's forearm and broke it with great strength and skill. The arm stayed in the air while Naruto gave it the order in his mind. In response, Sogeki screamed in pain as he felt his arm break. He then fell to his knees and grabbed the hanging limb. Naruto looked at Sogeki, who was crying and grinding his teeth like an animal that had been hurt. "If you do that again, your arm won't be the only thing that breaks," he warned. People like Conan who were watching the show worked very hard not to grimace as they saw the cruelty. So even though she knew Ryu didn't enjoy being mean, or at least didn't show it, he could be mean like he was a demon in human form. She shut her eyes and turned her head away to avoid seeing what was there. Naruto thought about the order he gave to Sogeki's right arm, which fell off to the side of the Iwa Nin who was writhing on the ground. The Iwa Nin heard Naruto say, "You will obey." Sogeki looked at Naruto with his one remaining eye, filled with anger and hatred. He was trying to scare the blonde a little, but Naruto was used to seeing much worse looks and more of them. Sometimes he just didn't care about the people around him. If someone was dying in front of him, he wouldn't care because, to him, men were animals that could do cruel things at random. People and animals could be easily told apart, like when you look at 2 apples that are exactly the same. People and animals were the same. Naruto told Sogeki through the link between his eye and his mind, "These are your orders. You must go back to Iwagakure and say that Ryu Yokaze beat you. You must also record information about the village's infrastructure, including its defense weaknesses, military strength, population, movements, motives, and how shinobi are assigned missions." Sogeki felt like the orders were burned into his mind. Naruto went to a dark corner of the room where a door was visible. He opened it and saw a bright white light behind it. Sogeki, who was high on the Iron Fist, saw himself through it. He didn't care about Ryu or Conan and would walk all the way to Iwagakure as Naruto's pawn, tool, or hostage. Naruto turned to his partner, who was also staring at him, maybe trying to figure out what he was up to. Sogeki had already left. Naruto said as he shut the door, "We should go. Kakazu is waiting for us." Naruto turned off his right Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan and sent chakra to his left Sharingan instead. He then looked at a spot that was lit up. From that spot, wispy black smoke with a purple tint rose into the room and formed a pillar. The smoke then spread out to form an arch of black purple smoke, with a black hoe sticking out of the middle of the arch and wispy plumes of smoke falling down it, giving it a very evil look. As Naruto walked toward the arch, he said, "Come." But Conan didn't feel comfortable with the whole thing. Ryu only said a few words about it, but the arch made me think it was a pass-through. Just tell me, where did the portal go? Right on. Naruto told her what it was when he sensed her unease at the dark portal. It's Kamiyo-no-Nyo, Sutepu no Shinigami, Steps of the Death God. It can act as a time-impairing technique or a time-impairing portal. The technique is absolute in its capabilities within combat, while the portal is perfect for any form of transportation. Simply walk through the portal and you'll find yourself on the other side of someplace new. Naruto got more experience by practicing the technique during his fight with Sogeki, and his eyes were already getting stronger. Before he became Madara's student, he learned with his body instead of his mind. This may have been because he was born with a lot of physical energy and gained a lot of spiritual energy from Madara's blood donation. Before going through the portal, Conan let out a small sigh. It was almost like being sucked in by a huge black mouth. Soon after, Naruto did the same thing after her. When his body went through, the portal disappeared completely. There is a dark spot in Konohagakure where only shadows meet. Only shades were allowed to go into this place, which was also called the Root Headquarters. As a Konoha elder and the Yami no Shinobi, darkness of the shinobi, Danzo Shimura was known for his strict and old-fashioned ideas about what a shinobi should be like. He was also a puppet master and shady manipulator, and he had done horrible things for the village without anyone being able to prove it. When it came to getting rid of people or things that Danzo didn't like, assassination and blackmail were his favorite tools. The soldiers of Root were just chess pieces that could be sacrificed and thrown away when they were no longer useful. For Danzo, a shinobi was someone who gave up everything for their village. Ideals, morals, laws, and feelings didn't matter to him or anyone else in the shinobi world. The only thing that mattered was building up the village's military strength even more, and Danzo was looking forward to the day when he could rule Konoha as its Hokage the way it was meant to be ruled. This was the last bit of the Will of Fire. It had made Konoha weak and easy for enemies like Orochimaru, Ryu Yokazi, Suna, Otto, and the Akatsuki to move freely through the village. Many people would think twice about attacking Konoha if Danzo could control his most powerful weapon and pet. With that much power, he could stop enemies from making any progress. It was supposed to be a village tool, but it wasn't meant to be because his old rival Sandame found out what he was doing with it. But that was a long time ago. Currently, he was waiting inside Root Headquarters to meet with a colleague he had worked with for years and who had helped him with his mission to become Hokage and other things he had done for the village. Since Danzo liked to keep things to himself, no one could find out about his acquaintance and hurt Konoha. And right in front of Danzo's only visible eye, there was a swirling distortion of space that turned in on itself. This person had been his partner since the day the man in the bandages found him among dead bodies and bloody trees. Some of the plans they made together were the attack on Kyuubi, the killing of Uchiha, and the reformation of the Akatsuki. He tried very hard but couldn't kill that person. Someone he had trained to take over as Hokage when the time came and be his heir when he died. Good job, Uchiha. It's been a long time, Danzo, Obito said as the Uchiha's whole body could be seen and wasn't swirling around. I've been so lonely without you these past few months, the Uchiha joked, but Danzo's expressionless face didn't show anything. He taught Obito everything he knew about shinobi and made him so good that not even Kakashi could beat him. He kept him a secret, though, because people would point fingers and make accusations if Obito wasn't under his cursed seal that made him paralyzed. Obito might have been able to tell everyone what Danzo has been up to for years. Also, even though Root is no longer officially together, the Sandame, Yondaime, and Godem are well aware that its former and present members are still alive and well loyal to Danzo and Obito. No one will question Obito's leadership of Root because not even the Hokage knew how many members it had or who they were. Obito asked rhetorically, so how did the attempt to force Ryu to do what you wanted go? He already knew the answer. The only eye that could be seen on Obito Danzo seemed to narrow in anger, but that could just be a trick of the mind. Danzo also looked at Obito's new clothes, like the Uchiha battle dress and mask, as well as the huge gunbai that was attached to a chain and sticking out of Obito's sleeve. Dan's Coldy asked in a rhetorical way, are we getting ready for war? The answer made Obito laugh because that's how it would look from everyone else's point of view. Obito rubbed his mask and thought as he said, sort of. But still, I really want to know how your meeting with Yokazi went. I guess it went well since he's now running around the world causing trouble with every step. Obito said, losing his good mood. Danzo's left eyebrow twitched in irritation. Iwa Nin are among the most stupid and the most unreliable. I was confident that Yokaze had been fully subdued and I could Koto Amatsukami during that time period, but I underestimated Yokaze. His knowledge of Uzumaki Fuinjutsu is astounding. He was able to uncover the weakness behind the chakra suppression seal. Spoke Danzo with a hint of praise towards the blonde Sharingan wielder. Also, Yokaze wouldn't be let loose on the world if you hadn't had failed in trying to make him our pawn in the first place. Behind his mask, Obito kept Danzo from seeing how he was feeling, but you could feel the anger in the air, like a needle sewing itself into fabric. But he didn't expect to find out who Ryu Yokaze really was. A man with many looks. Hideyoshi Naruto. Obito wondered if Danzo already knew about this. He knew that the Yondaime's son had joined the enemy, right? In a way, they are enemies, but the Akatsuki might become enemies if Naruto got his way with the organization. His charisma and power will make that happen. But Obito still had control over Nagato, like a dog with a leash. As long as he had control over the Rinnegan user, Naruto wouldn't do anything to hurt him. They were just waiting for each other to take the first step in their secret war, which no one could see. It was as if the blonde was never meant to be, and Obito had to make sure that Naruto would stay the same. It's possible that if people found out he was alive and had a powerful Keki Genkai and unmatched potential, they would want to follow him. Also, if the people of Konoha never find out that he's part of the Akatsuki, Naruto could use their support to turn them against Danzo, Obito, and the Root faction. Still, the game had started, the pieces were moving, and the score was 0.0. However, Obito had already lost a piece, Kisame Hoshigaki, the knight. That piece is the most powerful on the board. If Obito captures it, Naruto, the queen, will use his strength to take the kings, Nagato and Danzo, ending the game. Because of this, only a queen can fight another queen. Obito and Naruto were going to play the game to see which piece would fall first. You either win or you die in Game of Thrones. There isn't a middle ground. And Obito was going to die if he lost to Naruto. Obito could feel the power coming from that man's chakra, which was big and scary but still very strong. His eyes were cold and empty, just like his. His body was strong and fit, ready to overcome any challenge. And he had a sneaky, clever mind that no one could read until they found their head missing from their shoulders. How did Naruto get so strong? He must have learned a lot from a master who wasn't good at anything else. But the first Hokage felt like he knew something about his chakra. But Obito knew that Naruto and Hashirama were not related by blood, at least not that he knew of. That way of thinking would lead Obito astray. Thinking about the past was a sure way to die young, but thinking about the future kept your mind in strength. Naruto is an enemy of everything he made and did. And all enemies must be killed. His plan is the only one that can stay in place. Whether or not we have him under control is of no consequence. Yokaze is a rotten seed that will seep its way into everything we know. His skill and potential growth will only continue to grow unless we pluck the sapling from its roots before it fully grows into a tree. But still, when Tsunade announces his full heritage, the civilians of the village will be shepherded like sheep and will no doubt give him their support and rally behind him as his allies. That is if they don't discover his connections to the Akatsuki, but one thing we can count on is that, like lambs to the slaughter, Uzumaki will sacrifice them like pieces on the board. Drawled Obito to Danzo, who opened his one eye in surprise at the surprise news. When Obito saw this, he decided to remind Danzo of who they were dealing with. Danzo woke up when Obito said, "What? You didn't know? Ryu Yokaze and Naruto Uzumaki are the same person. Ryu is Naruto and Naruto is Ryu. I can't believe you couldn't figure it out," Obito said with a smug tone. Danzo didn't say anything in response, but he did slightly tighten his grip on his cane. Danzo changed his face back to his normal one and said, "So the Kyuubi lives." "I don't know, the Kyuubi may be alive, or it may still be dead, however, I just happen to believe that the latter is fact and not the other way around. But it does raise a rather interesting question, how is Naruto Uzumaki alive? I don't know, and I doubt we will ever have the answer," said Obito. "If he is Naruto Uzumaki, then what happened to the marks on his whiskers that showed his connection to the Kyuubi? Even if he died, he would still have the marks that showed he was a weapon," Danzo asked. Obito just shrugged his shoulders. "You know how I don't like pondering the ifs, and whats, or what might have been, but if only you had your hands on Tekurufu a little longer then this situation may have been averted. That Tekurufu, he would have been much easier to control back then, he had such great talent and ability. Obito thought about the skilled root worker. That is, a former root agent. As Danzo sneered at losing his best agent, Tekurufu, he said, if Hiruzen hadn't gotten in the way and disbanded Root, then maybe Tekurufu would have been useful, along with all of my other agents. Who are all average at best. He was still in charge of finding Ryu Yokazi, who was already a powerful asset. As for Tsunade, she won't be a problem now that Sandaime is dead because she's not as strong as her teacher or grandfather and can be tricked with the help of Homura and Kaharu. Also, Tsunade didn't know much about what was going on in her village, the dark secrets that were hidden under the leaves and in the roots. However, the problem is still the thorn that cuts into our flesh. I've hired killers from Kumo and Suna to kill Yokazi, and my spies tell me that other people are also looking for him. But I still have doubts about their ability to do their jobs. People who know you well often can figure out what you're thinking. Danzo spoke, and Obito nodded. Don't worry about it, even if the killers fail, Obito told Danzo, holding her attention. I already have a piece behind enemy lines. Obito then used his Kamui Jutsu to create a swirling distortion that sucked him up like a vacuum. This left Danzo to think about what to do with this information. He couldn't tell Tsunade because she would send out search parties and bring the enemy into the village. If he told Kaharu or Homura, they would also tell Tsunade, and things would get out of hand. For now, he had to trust Obito and see what he could do to get Naruto off the board. Sakura was walking through Konoha in the pouring rain. It was always raining or the clouds wouldn't part, and it felt like a wound that would never heal. There were times when she wanted to give up on the weather and just hope that one day the clouds would part to let the sun shine through. When she thought about the sun, she saw a blonde woman she really wanted to see again. She sometimes felt like she couldn't live on in the world around her. It was like when Naruto died, a part of her went with him. She would smile at her friends, but did she really smile? If she wasn't happy, she didn't see the point in smiling. Many people thought she had moved on since Naruto died, but his death has left a deep wound in her heart that will never heal. People who knew she hadn't given up on the blonde keep telling her that. Get a grip of yourself and move on. Why would you miss that thing? That monster should have died sooner. You know this isn't healthy for you, besides why mourn for him? Stop acting so depressed and have some fun. Ino would talk about these people behind their backs and ask for their advice, because she thought she deserved to be healed by other people. Why keep the world the way it is? She didn't know. All she wanted was to hug a blonde jerk until his orange clothes tore. She hadn't told anyone this, but she sometimes thought about committing suicide to end the pain. She had dreams about it and would wake up with beads of sweat running down her body. This must have been how Tsunade felt. But she could spend time with the person she loved. Sometimes she would just listen to Tsunade talk about Dan, even though it hurt the blonde women. It must have made her heart feel better to know that there was S. But she didn't get over her pain so quickly. All she knew about Naruto was that he liked her and that he loved ramen. She didn't even try to get to know him back then. She was so selfish and spoiled, but most 12-year-old girls are. When they became a Genin team, she was just sitting there, thinking that Sasuke would probably never love her back and that she had fallen in love with the wrong person. She didn't see it even though it was right in front of her. Now she knew it, she was never really happy with Sasuke. No matter how much time she spent with him, he never really made her smile, laugh, or feel warm, like the sun. Sasuke wouldn't look at her very often, and when he did, he was either scowling, sneering, or having an annoyed look on his face. He even called her annoying several times, which made her wonder what kind of person would say that to someone. Only to someone wasn't fond of. But when she was with Naruto and his silly antics and over the top excitement, she smiled, laughed, and felt like the sun was beating like a heart inside her. She would admit that Naruto wasn't as handsome as Sasuke, but his big smile more than made up for it. He complimented things she didn't like, he saved her many times without asking or expecting a thank you, and just knowing that she would still smile meant the world to him. She would do anything to relive those moments and live them again. She knew that people died and that no one could live forever, but Naruto died way too soon. The only time she could be with him was in her dreams, and when she woke up, she would feel sad and remind herself that it was all a dream. It was only a dream. Would it matter if she never woke up again? Would it matter if he wasn't real? It dawned on her why she became a medic and why she kept living, to keep people like Naruto from dying. She knew that people like Naruto would die at some point, but she could make it less likely. To stop senseless killing and hatred. Would Naruto be proud of her? To know that she is trying to be better than she was. At least she could find some comfort in the fact that when she worked at the hospital, she would sometimes check up on the kids when other doctors weren't available. She liked being around Naruto and would smile at the happy faces of the kids and their parents. She would admit that she was jealous that a future like that would never come true. She had a small thought while she was waiting for Naruto to come back from his last mission. What kind of life would they live if Naruto was still alive? She knew that thoughts like that would not help her in any way. As she walked through Konoha's muddy streets, she caught a glimpse of her parents' house. They knew she was in love with Naruto, but they hadn't told her, and she would have liked it that way. Today was still an important date though. It was her first mission as a Chunin, and it was also known as the tragedy of Uchiha Pass. After she was promoted, Sakura thought of the sad day that everyone in Hidden Leaf Village felt. It was her first mission as a Chunin, and she was one of 80 Konoha shinobi sent on a mission to get back information that had been stolen from the village. The information was dangerous, and it included a list of Anbu agents, spies, and intelligence contacts from all over the shinobi world who were connected to Konoha. If someone got their hands on those papers, they would learn about the spies who were hidden in other villages and how their families lived and worked with them to get the information they were told to get, like weak points in defense, military movements, and weapons. Because of how important they were strategically, many of the ninja were infiltration agents who blended in with their surrounding communities. A lot of Anbu agents and high-ranking Jonin were brought together to get the stolen information back from the Iwagakure. Sakura was only picked because Tsunade believed in her and trusted her to do the job. She was second in command of the mission after her captain, a man she didn't know or want to get to know. The many ninja who were after the 4 Iwagakure shinobi were very good at hiding their identities. And they did find them. It was at Uchiha Pass, where there was a big town. If her robotic body hadn't shown up at her front door, Sakura would have kept remembering the intense past events. She opened the door to see her mother giving her a disapproving look. Her mother stared back with just as much intensity as the blonde woman. "Young lady, where have you been?" asked Mebuki as she put her hands on her hips and waited for her daughter to answer. "As you know, coming home from a mission is my job, or didn't you get the memo?" Sakura yelled at her mother as she continued to stare at her. One thing that had changed in her personal life was her relationship with her mother. When Mebuki found out that Sakura was seeing that demon, she became very angry and fought with her so badly that almost everyone in the Leaf Village lost their hearing. At that point, Sakura got along better with her father because he didn't mind Naruto seeing him as a poor boy instead of a container. However, like all the other parents, he didn't do anything to help Naruto, which made him just as guilty as the other villagers in Sakura's eyes. Over the years, Mebuki has tried and failed to get Sakura to give up on Naruto and find a man who deserves her more. But her stubborn daughter would not listen to her. Every time she tried to pair Sakura up with a handsome young man, they would end up in the hospital with broken bones, burns, scrapes, bruises, cuts, bent limbs, and torn clothing. Some of them are still recovering in the hospital as I write this chapter. But Sakura was stubborn because Mebuki taught her that way, so the blonde woman wouldn't give up. But now wasn't the time. Every time you come home, you track mud and water all over the house. Can't you ever respect your space and everyone else's? Mebuki asked, getting a dirty look from her daughter with pink hair. As Sakura walked past her mother and into her room, she said, "Sorry, it's not like I can control the weather." She did this with a hint of sarcasm and disrespect. She saw her father reading a newspaper at the dining room table and said, "Hi honey," but Sakura didn't pay attention to him and kept walking. When she got to her room, she threw her backpack against the wall and took off her shinobi clothes. Instead, she put on hugging pants and a simple yellow shirt that fit her like a glove because she was just going to be lazy around the house. Since she had nothing else to do but watch the rain hit her window, Sakura got out a pen and paper and started writing the mission report while trying not to think about Naruto. A short time later, she heard a knock on her door. She let the person in and saw her father telling her that there was an Anbu at the door waiting for her. It turned out that Tsunade had asked her to come in for an important reason she didn't know about. Her mother told her on her way out to remember to bring an umbrella in case it rained. Sakura took an umbrella from her father without saying a word and ran to the Hokage mansion. When she got to the mansion, she was shown to a special room where her mentor was waiting for her. He was sitting on a green couch and looking out over the wet village. Sakura stood by the door with her hands clenched and said, "You wanted to see me, Tsunade." Sama. As Tsunade looked at her apprentice, Sakura, who was like a daughter to her, she said, "I wanted to see you to talk about some things about that incident." Sakura nodded at her teacher and sat down on the couch across from her mentor. "This has to do with Akiha Pass? Isn't it, sensei?" Sakura asked in a serious voice as she stared at the ground, trying very hard not to remember what had happened. "The wedding anniversary is today. And we still don't know what really happened that day," Tsunade said, looking at the ground. "Sakura, please tell me what happened. As your Hokage and as someone who loves you, I want to know." When Sakura looked up, she saw Suad looking at her with brown eyes that were pleading with her to open up. The look on his face almost seemed like it wanted to heal a scar. I replied, "They blame me, don't they?" Sakura said. Tsunade sighed because she was right. Tsunade said, "Please tell me, Sakura." They looked into each other's eyes for a few minutes, and after that, Sakura gave up staring and told her teacher what was going on. She began, "Everything was going well. We had found the infiltrators and had the information." Tsunade was paying close attention to the story. The Hokage and the families who were grieving needed to know what happened. "We did what we thought was right, and it saved lives," Sakura said next in the story. "When I talked to the captain, we talked about what we should do next. He decided that we should destroy the information so that no one could get it. This would keep the secrets safe and save lives," Sakura said, and she agreed with the captain that such sensitive information shouldn't be shared with anyone. There was silence after that. There are some places where the silence is so sharp it cuts like a knife. Between pain and death. There were no sounds at all, not even the birds singing or the rain hitting our skin. Not even our feet hitting the ground. We did not hear anything. Until it came, Sakura said. Tsunade was sitting on the edge of her seat, as if she were watching a scary movie. "What happened? How about you, Sakura? What was it?" asked Tsunade, who was interested in what had happened. "The first sound we heard was a scream that sounded like an animal in pain. Writhing in pain and being surrounded by scary whispers. One of my friends said it was just a crazy person who ate some berries that make you see things. I knew it wasn't like that, though. I couldn't get a good look at the person because my friends were covering him up, so I went to tell the captain about this lunatic, as they called him. As I was talking to the captain, the next thing I heard was blades cutting flesh and battle cries. Then I heard screams that could break glass and wake the dead, as if a chorus or symphony were being played. When I turned around to look, all I saw was a body flying toward me. After that, I think I passed out. When she felt a hand on her shoulder, she saw that her teacher had moved seats and was now sitting next to her. What came next?" asked Tsunade, which made tears form in the corners of Sakura's eyes, and like a flood the tears trailed down Sakura's cheeks and her lips and hands quivered. Her whole body was shaking, hoping to not remember to what she woke up to. "Please tell me, Sakura." "I woke up in a sea of blood. Things were going as usual for the people of Lightning Village in Kumogakure, which was high up in the sky and surrounded by mountains and clouds. The sky was always a light blue color. The Raikage was in his office signing off on papers and giving his shinobi orders. He had been thinking about the attack on the Kajiro Temple and the theft of the sacred Tanbogiri. No. Tsurugi for a while now. A black blade that can have a lot of power when used by a master. It was important to him that Kumo had the blade again, where it belonged. So, the Raikage would send one of his best agents to kill Ryu Yokazi, get back the Tanbogiri, and get money from a very rich contributor, Danzo. When someone knocked on his door, he let them in. Someone was there, a thin, cute-looking woman who looked to be in her early 20s. Her blonde hair was pulled back and styled into two long strands that looked like antennae and pointed to the back of her head. She had bright green eyes and a thin layer of pink lipstick on. The way she looked, with her slim hourglass shape, made men drool. In addition to the Kumogakure flak jacket, she wore black opera gloves with spikes on the knuckles, long leather pants that were skin tight, black high heels that were easy for her to walk in, and a leather bikini underneath. She also had a tattoo of the kanji character for violence on her right shoulder and a spiked choker chain around her neck. The girl asked in a mild voice, "So you called for me?" "Yes, I have need for your talents, and you're the only person I can trust for this mission, since if I send B he will most likely screw the mission up and get lost in the process where he could go on a holiday for who knows how long. A said as he rubbed his temples. As the woman began to stretch, she asked, okay, so who am I killing this time? Ryu Yokaze, and you will also get the Tombogiri that he stole from Kumogakure from him, A said to get the woman's attention. The blonde woman said, okay, I just hope he's good looking. I don't want to kill a good looking guy. A sighed in frustration at the woman. You were to kill him, not flirt or make out with him, understand? A breathed deeply. Fine, fine, there you go ruining my fun, again. Do you agree to go on this mission, Ninfu Boruto? Asked A with his arms crossed. Ninfu asked, fine, but can I flirt with him right before I kill him? This made A drop his head, which meant that the answer was yes. He gave up quickly because the girl was so stubborn that it was almost impossible to persuade her otherwise. At Sanagakure, in the sand, wind, and heat that the country was known for. The winds blistering, blazing fires were making it hard to see what its leader really wanted. Gaara, the young man who was picked to be the new Kazekage of the village in the sand. The rest of Gaara's kind, the Jinchuriki, had also been hurt. It didn't take him long to learn to hate where he lived and the people who hurt him. But he thought that killing those people was the only way to show that he was real and living among us. But his beliefs were put to the test when he found comfort in Naruto Uzumaki, who was also of his kind and the son of his Yondaime. Someone who went through a lot more pain than he did but still had the courage and determination to keep going. Gaara had lost his first friend when Sasuke Uchiha, an old rival, killed him in the Valley of the En. Gaara didn't want to kill anyone before Naruto came into his life and changed his mind. But now, that was different. His desire to kill Sasuke was much stronger than the pain he was in. He wanted the Uchiha's blood to stain his sand and make Sasuke look at him with red eyes in horror. The sound of a knock at the door woke Gaara up from his thoughts. Like any cage, he led the person inside. To show another one of his best ninjas, one who was also thought to be Kazekage but turned down the job for personal reasons. As Gaara thought, he laced his fingers together in a thinking pose and said, Yakedo, I have an important mission that I think only you can complete. Yakedo was tall and thin. He had bright red hair that was shoulder length and styled into spikes that were pulled back. He had a widow's peak and small eyebrows. Eyes that are bright emerald green and tattoos under each eye that look like reverse teardrops. He was wearing a Swangakure flak jacket, but it didn't have shoulder pads or a collar on it. His pants were too big and fell down in the back, and he wore an orange sash around his waist and an orange jacket over his flak jacket. He also wore a ragged yellow scarf with dark yellow stripes around his neck, and he wore red wrist waders. When are you going to stop wearing that ridiculous color? Said Gaara. With an evil grin, Yakedo said, the moment I stop liking orange, which is never. I need you to eliminate the man that killed our previous daimyo. He's a powerful and experienced member of the Akatsuki with powerful friends and allies. Oh, you mean the Ryu guy, why? If anything, he actually helped our village, and from what I've seen on the street, people are, actually, happy he's dead. Even your brother and sister are happy. Yakedo was puzzled. Despite what he did for our village, we cannot allow a shinobi like him to be wandering around killing daimyos. Spoke in Gaara. With a small smile, Yakedo said, fine, fine. I'll do it, but I better get a raise from it. Gaara sighed when the man asked him to give up, but he did. Hidan and Kakazu were both waiting patiently for their soon to be temporary teammates to show up. One was more excited than the other. A black, purple arch door appeared out of nowhere just as they were about to leave. And their friends, whom they had been waiting for, came out. The taller one, on the other hand, got an unpleasant surprise when they stepped in dog poop. He lifted his foot to see the natural waste on it, and for his bad luck, he got a check mark. Conan, his partner, tried hard not to laugh at the scene, but Kakazu didn't care and could relate because everyone goes through it sometimes. But Hidan just wanted to let everyone know what he thought. Did you see that, Kakazu? He totally stepped in that dog poop. Haha, that was a classic. Hidan yelled with joy as he patted Kakazu on the back, and the stitched up man barely groaned. It was clear that Naruto understood what Hidan said because his ears twitched in response. He quickly kicked Hidan in the face with the foot that had the dog stool on it. Some of the stool hit Hidan in the face. That's what you get for making Ryu Yokaze look stupid. Hidan, meanwhile, was yelling and running around the small clearing while saying things that couldn't be understood. As Naruto scraped the crap off his foot, Konan said, "Kakazu." Kakazu said in a dull voice, "Nice to see you again." Bakudo Poka is in Takigakure, readying himself for the gambling tournament. All I know is he is in the village and it's best not to draw attention yourself as he'll run at the first sign of trouble. Naruto and Konan agreed with the old shinobi's words and followed him through a waterfall that led to the village. Hidan was staring at Ryu the whole time. They soon arrived in Takigakure and started walking around the village. There were canals running through the streets, making loops and turns. People rode in gondolas for a variety of reasons, such as getting around, dating, or helping out friends. If it were possible to smell like clean fish, the whole village would have it. There was a big lake around the village, though, where lots of fish must live. And across the lake, there was a huge tree that covered the village and kept both enemies and allies from seeing it. The tree did block some of the sun's light, but not enough to make it impossible to see. The blonde was interested in Kakazu, though, because he could feel the hate and anger coming off of him. Naruto could be more direct with Kakazu because Naruto has been treated the same way. He knew what Kakazu did in the village in the past, but he didn't ask because he was polite or because he wasn't interested in the subject. He could also feel Hidan's sharp gaze on him. It was almost as if Hidan wanted to kill him with that scary look, but since glares don't kill, they didn't have much of an effect on him. Konan was acting like herself, but she was also paying attention to what was going on around her. Along with that, she thought the village was very pretty. Every step Kakazu took made him more and more angry. He was so mad that he might have burned the ground under his feet. But he still had to collect money for the Akatsuki because he was their treasurer. Money was an important part of their plan, and the nobles who wanted Bakudo's head were a huge source of cash. We will never find Bakudo within the village no matter how good a Sensoryu or Ryu. He has a way of hiding from his debt collectors. He will only appear at the gambling tournament that is being held tonight at the local casino. Bakudo never misses a chance to gain money in clean ways. Kakazu spoke to Rai and Konan completely ignored Hidan. Bakudo has a habit of betting mostly all of his money on gambling and other things. We first need to collect the money from him and then leave with his head. Should be rather simple, but he also has a streak of cheating to his name, but since the tournament will be centers around his favorite game, I don't expect him to cheat, but he will win above all else. Kakazu talked about what he knew about Bakudo. So we need to look the part to get the upper hand on Bakudo, Konan said, and Kakazu agreed. It looks like we're going shopping, and Ryu is going to pay, Konan said, making the blonde raise an eyebrow. All three of them went their separate ways to shop for disguises, leaving Naruto to wander around the village since he already had a suit and had given them the money. He saw people going about their daily business as if they didn't care about anything. He would sometimes look across the lake and see that it sparkled and shone, like life was glued to the water. But he noticed something strange. People were cheering, drinking alcohol, and having fun with their friends. To Naruto, this wasn't the right way to act at a gambling tournament. It was different. Maybe it was because it was that time of year. Besides games and food, he saw that people were setting up booths with drinks, toys, and other things. There were games where you had to shoot water and win prizes. There were also games where you had to get as many balls into the clown's mouth as possible and win prizes. And many lanterns were being hung from the ceiling. They had a noble beauty that the blonde had only seen a few times. He saw kids running by him while pretending to be ninjas. They were holding wooden kunai, katanas, and shuriken and wearing fake hitai. 8 with symbols of their village scrawled on them. They were laughing and playing like nothing was wrong, as if they thought their little world would never end. If they were ninjas, they probably wanted to join for the glory and cool action. They were so innocent that it almost made Naruto smile. As a child, he never had any innocence. He didn't think he had any from the day he was born, because he went through things that other kids should never have to go through. It wasn't important. That didn't matter at all. The blonde kept strolling along. After a few minutes, he walked right by someone who might have known what was going on around him. "Hello, young man. Are you here for the Ikirantan, Spirit Lantern Festival?" asked an old woman in her early 50s who seemed humble. When Naruto walked by, she was hanging up lanterns. "No, I'm just passing by, and to be honest, I've never heard of the Ikirantan Festival," Naruto said without much emotion. "But this Ikirantan Festival interests me. The only other festivals he had been to were in Wave Country in Kyubi, where the villages would play their favorite game, Fox Hunt. Well, this is a very important festival in Takigakure that has been going on since the village was first built. Would you like me to tell you about its history, young man? The young blonde gave him a small nod. To begin with, there were two clans that were at war with each other and had been for hundreds of years, the woman said, but Naruto cut her off. The Senju and the Uchiha clans. No, but they were similar. They were called Shin clan and the Rai clan. Now among their members 2 children were born, the head of the clan's son, Kurata from the Shin clan, and the head of the clan's daughter, Minako from the Rai clan. One day both were walking through a forest by a river where the two of them happened upon each other. They say it was love at first sight. Spoke the woman, with Naruto listening closely, noting that this tale seemed eerily similar. After that day, they met up every day by the same spot every time the sun would set, but instead of speaking they would send each other lanterns, and written on the paper they started conveying their feelings for each other. But when the fighting between their two clans intensified, the violence increased and Kurata lost his life during one of their battles. Minako, overcome with grief, threw herself against a tree, battering her body again and again until her bones were broken. Naruto was feeling that the story changed for the worse. Then, while laying on the ground, grieving and weeping, she cried. Her tears were large and plentiful, and her tears later became a lake where all manners of creatures and seafaring animals made their home in her tears. Eventually a giant koi fish, known as the elephant koi, known for its massive size, gifted Minako a lantern that allowed her to see her beloved Kurata whenever she closed her eyes while holding the lantern. Naruto had to say that it was a sad story. But after the elephant koi gifted Minako with the lantern, a seafaring dragon made its lair in Minako's tears. The dragon gifted Minako with a single pearl, which later grew into a massive tree in the middle of the lake. But still, even with the lantern and the pearl seed, Minako still grieved. So out of pity the dragon ate her. The end. Spoke the old woman to Naruto's uninterested face towards her. That's such a sad story. They say that if you hold a lantern and close your eyes during the festival you will find what is really important to you, said the lady. When Naruto's calm gaze is at its strongest. After that, Naruto left, not believing the story or fantasy. While he was still walking, he came across a sad sight. Naruto heard a voice yelling, "Join the religion of Jashinism. Jashinism will show you the true way to enlightenment and, above all, a place with him in paradise." He looked over someone's shoulder and saw Hidan trying to get civilians and shinobi to join his religion. Naruto asked Hidan if there was anything more stupid than the story he told him about Jashinism. Another thing was that no one was paying attention to Hidan. Not even a crowd had gathered around him. Religion didn't mean anything to him, so he didn't see the point in following a god who doesn't exist. With those thoughts going through his mind, he chose to leave. Hidan tried to stop Ryu from leaving when he saw him in the crowd and forgave him. So he ran through the crowd that wasn't there to catch up to the person who was using the Sharingan. He put his hand on the young man's shoulders when he caught up. Hidan was getting too excited about his religion and talking over Ryu. "Hey, listen, I know we didn't have the best of introductions, but I'm willing to forgive you if you join the followers of Jashin. Together we will spread our great religion to the corners of the world where everyone will adhere to the laws of Jashin." Naruto asked, "What?" This made Hidan look stupid and fall to the ground in anger. "Why would I want to join your followers?" Naruto asked, referring to the fact that the only Jashin follower he knew was Hidan, and the fact that Hidan couldn't get everyone to convert to his religion meant that there wasn't much to gain from becoming a Jashinist. Hidan got up from the floor with a shocked look on his face and asked, "Don't you seek enlightenment?" Naruto answered straight out, "No. Besides, anyone who joins Jaism is really a fool," Naruto said as he walked away from Hidan, who was fuming. Naruto basically just called Hidan an idiot and made fun of his religion. Okay, Hidan would let Kakuzu off the hook because he was his partner, but Ryu made him think it was okay to kill him. Hidan got his scythe ready and threw it at Ryu downwards so that the pointy end would hit him and kill him. The man with silver hair smiled victoriously as the blades got closer and closer to Ryu's shoulder, killing him on the ground. But before he could blink, he saw Naruto grab the scythe and flip it over his shoulder. Hidan was then carried and slammed onto the ground a bit away from the blonde, making a small dust cloud and a spiderweb crack on the ground. The Jashin follower moaned in pain, but he didn't have time to get up because Naruto's foot was already in his face, and his weapon was being pulled away from him while he was still holding it. What they did made the people who were watching feel a little scared. When Naruto thought that Bakuto might be watching, he chose to leave and act normally so that Bakuto wouldn't think anything was wrong. For this reason, Naruto quickly disappeared, leaving Hidan alone. When he moved from where he was before, he wasn't near the lake that Takigakure was known to have. Naruto could feel the religious man's evil chakra closing in on him, so Hidan had no choice but to follow him. Naruto didn't fear Hidan, so he just stayed where he was and waited for his fellow Akatsuki member. "I'm going to kill you," Hidan yelled as he swung his scythe at Naruto, but the boy was quick enough to avoid it. Naruto jumped into the water to get away from Hidan. He didn't want to fight, so he waited for the gambling tournament to start so he could get away from Hidan and his annoying religion. When Hidan landed on the water and used his chakra to stay afloat, Naruto gave up and got ready to fight Hidan, but he never goes all out on him. He always wondered why, maybe because he got some of his habits from Madara. His teacher told him, "Who goes all out on a child?" In any case, it was fun to hold back. Naruto took off his sai and is now ready to fight Hidan. He also put chakra into his right eye. Now was the perfect time to kill the traitor, even if it was Hidan. In spite of this, being in charge of Hidan had its benefits. To free the Akatsuki from Obito's control, one could only take charge of its members. That was taken care of by his Kamiyo because it was impossible to get away from the eye's gaze. Once it had control over you, you would be a slave to do what its master told you. At the same time, an old man walking with a cane saw the two shinobi getting ready to fight. "They better watch out for the Unagi," the old man warned before walking off, not caring about the powerful ninjas. They both charged at the other, and their weapons clashed loudly. Naruto blocked Hidan's downward slice, which sent water flying everywhere. In an amazing display of strength, Naruto pushed back against Hidan's scythe. This threw off the silver-haired man's balance, giving Naruto time to kick him across the water and away. In response, Hidan threw his scythe at Naruto. Naruto saw it coming with his Sharingan and was able to avoid it, but Hidan then turned it around so it was aimed at Naruto's back. Naruto couldn't feel the scythe's attack because it wasn't made of chakra, but with his Sharingan, he could see the ripples in Hidan's muscle and figure out what he could do, so he backflipped in the air to avoid it. Hidan was lying on the ground with his scythe buried in his stomach. His blood was dripping into the water, and Hidan had a horrified look on his face. Hidan yelled, "Ow! Ow! You dickhead, do you know how much that hurts, oh god?" This made Naruto raise an eyebrow in surprise. Until now, he had never met someone who could take a hit like that and still look fine. In an instant, Hidan took out his scythe and hit him in the neck. How did he do? Does he never die? There is no such thing in the world. Even the legendary sage of the six paths was human, even though he had god-like powers. Hidan must have messed around with his body and used some religious ninjutsu to get to a point where he almost couldn't die. However, he will still die at some point, even though he says he is immortal. His body needs nutrients to stay healthy, and I don't think he can't get older. Naruto thought, "It looks like my only options now are to wear him down until he can't fight back, take control of him, or cut off his limbs so he can't do anything but bite my knees off." He was figuring out Hidan's jutsu. He likes to fight close up, and he uses the fact that he is immortal to his advantage by being able to keep fighting even with 5 swords in his chest. But it seems to hurt him some, and his wounds heal at a remarkable rate that is similar to mine. Still, he must have jutsu that would put his opponents out of commission, or he could use his immortality to help his jutsu in some way. I might have to use Oshi no Shuduan, teachings of the monastery, if I get hurt too badly in battle. Naruto thought about one of his strongest abilities and said, "I feel that normal medical ninjutsu will not be enough to save me if I get hurt." In Hidan's mind right now. Kill, 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 pain, lots of pain, kill, 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 he said. Hidan didn't think so. Having these thoughts, Hidan charged at Ryu again, who jumped back and got ready to fight his fellow Akatsuki member. Hidan jumped into the air and swung his scythe down at Naruto, trying to split his skull open. But Naruto spun around and tried to kick Hidan, who blocked the kick with his scythe. Hidan then pulled out one of his retractable spears and tried to stab Naruto in the shoulder, but Naruto blocked it with his scythe. And with amazing speed cut Hidan's throat and pushed against the scythe to get some space between himself and Hidan. But he did all of this while closing the distance between them, where he saw the member's blood all over the place and on his clothes. All the people in the village could hear Hidan yelling, "Oh, you fucker," as he held his neck tight. "Do you know how much that fucking hurts?" According to Naruto, "I don't know since I've never had my throat slit before." He said this with a smirk that would make anyone mad. Hidan charged at Naruto with his triple bladed scythe and spear, going berserk. He didn't care if he hurt himself, as long as he killed the person who was using the Sharingan. To Hidan, Ryu was the most annoying person in the world, second only to Kakazu. He would kill him without enjoying the death. When Konan got back from a fancy shop with a dress she liked, she was walking through the village. She was currently interested in Ryu, especially his health, since he had just taken a kunai to the head and seemed fine. I mean, who'd make it through that? After hearing yelling, she looked across the bridge she was walking on and saw two jerks fighting. One of them was blonde, which made her sigh. Kakazu used Ryu's money to buy himself a nice suit because he didn't like spending his own money on himself. He was thinking about what else he could buy when he heard yelling and turned around to see two idiots trying to stab each other. He sighed when he saw that one of them had silver hair and a big scythe. Ryu was ready to fight. The thing that was making him defensive was Hidan's supposed love of violence, which he didn't think about enough. He was very good at throwing his scythe around and aiming it at Hidan's side or back when he tried to cut him with his spear. This kept his attention on the Psycho's main weapon. He would either change strategies or do the opposite. Other than that, his movements were wild and savage, and he was hard to predict because he was acting on instincts instead of his intelligence, not that Hidan had any to begin with. He jumped away from Hidan and sealed his size while practicing a jutsu with his hands. Naruto said, "Kaiten, Fuku Tochikawa, blowtorch stream," as he focused chakra into his hand, making it look like a blowtorch. When Hidan got close enough, he let out the built up fire chakra as a huge stream that would burn everything in its way and make a huge cloud of steam from the superheated water. Naruto used his Sharingan to look for his opponent, but the steam blocked his view. Until the steam clears, it will continue to block his view, so he unlocked his sai and got ready for battle. It was now clear to him that Hidan was coming up behind him. His gross chakra stood out like a bright light in the dark, so Naruto did a sweep kick that knocked Hidan off his feet and into the water, where he repeatedly stabbed him with his sais. The water turned red with blood, and some of it even got on Hidan's coat, which didn't stop Naruto. In fact, it made him look scarier. When he was done, Naruto jumped away from Hidan. When the steam finally cleared, Hidan could be seen screaming and moaning in pain. Naruto saw that Hidan's clothes were missing and burned from his right shoulder to his hip. Also, the left side of his torso up to his face was covered in third-degree burns, but Hidan's right eye was fine and he was barely protecting himself from the fire release jutsu. When Hidan got to his feet, his chakra was still supporting his body. "It will be good to end your life, blasphemer," Hidan yelled as he aimed his scythe at Ryu, whom he really wanted to kill. But right now, Naruto could feel that this other being was getting closer to him. That person was hard for Konan to see, so she asked, "Who is that?" Kakazu looked at the money in his hand and said, "That guy is dead." It was Ryu's money. Naruto saw a new person join the field when he looked over his shoulder. This person wore a Kirigakure flak jacket without the shoulder pads, a black leather jacket with flames on the sleeves, a chain belt around his waist, black jeans that were torn in different places, and black boots. He had skull-shaped jewelry on his fingers, loop and stud earrings all over his ears, and his eyebrow was pierced. His eyes were green and his hair was dirty blonde. He had individual bangs over his forehead and his hair was styled in an old mullet. Like Wei. He looked very young and good looking. The young man combed his mullet with his hand and said, "Okay, it looks like my leader wants you dead. I have a job to do." Hidan yelled, "Hey, go away. I'm the only one who can kill him." After giving him an odd look, the Kirigakure ninja turned his attention back to Naruto. The Kirigakure nin said, "Hey, my name is Marodi." He took something out of his jacket that looked like line cards. If the target displays aggression, memory loss, remorse, rejection or shows nothing at all, elimination is advised. "Boy, did they send the wrong for this job," mumbled Marodi in contempt. He pulled out a sealing cross in front of him and said, "Sorry about this, you know, my job." Naruto shrugged his shoulders and said, "No problem." Marodi took out what looked like a custom sitar and began playing the strings. He yelled, "Dance, water, dance." and began strumming his sitar strings. This caused the water around Naruto and Hidan to rise and form musical notes. These notes quickly started to swarm around Naruto, who channeled lightning chakra through his sighs, making them sharper and numbing him. He yelled, "Hey, what about me?" It was Marody who asked, "What about you?" This made Hidan look bad again. Naruto turned around and cut, stabbed, and slicked his way across the water, destroying the water. Based musical notes. It was Marody's jutsu, and it was called Maijikaru Memo, which means musical notes. The enemy was hit by swarms of them and waves of water that would do concussive damage. Marody controlled them because he could combine music and chakra to make powerful attacks, and no, this isn't a Keki Genkai. Once Naruto had the musical notes, he charged at Marody, who then sent up rising columns of water to try to stop him. It didn't work, though, because Naruto was able to easily avoid them with his Sharingan. In just 8 seconds, Naruto disabled Marody, knocked him out, and wrapped him in a scroll that said, "Human," in kanji. The person who was using the Sharingan turned back to Hidan, who looked ready to fight. Seeing that made him even more excited to fight Ryu. It was the Kirigakure Nin who said, "They really sent the wrong guy for this job." Hidan threw the metal capable from his scythe at Naruto again. It attached him to his scythe around Ryu, showing that he was using his brain instead of his strength. But Naruto was already tied down by the cable by the time he could react. Hidan had already jumped into the air and was ready to slash him with his scythe. Naruto switched places with a floating log that wasn't too far away, but he did get a small cut on the side of his cheek. He might have been getting too excited about the fight, and besides, he liked getting hurt, and Kisame made him hurt more than once. His power was being held back at the time. But you get the point. Naruto flew through the air and did a flying kick. He was very fast and strong. The kick, on the other hand, was so strong and powerful that the air around Naruto started to get tight and change shape. There are dark green stripes all over the body of a green tiger that is pouncing. Naruto's strongest taijutsu move. Naruto yelled, "Banjin-ton Torakiku, savage flying tiger kick," and slammed his foot into Hidan's stomach, making the silver-haired man cough up even more blood. Hidan then rocketed backwards off the lake and hit the wall right next to where Kakazu was sitting. The impact of the kick was so strong that it broke the wall into small pieces. Luckily for them, it was a building that was going to be torn down to make room for a shoe factory. "Do you need help?" Kakazu asked in a sarcastic tone as he looked through the hole in the building and saw Hidan's legs sticking up into the air. Hidan called out to Kakazu, "You know what? Eat a dick." He stood up and massaged Kakazu's head. "It felt like 10 circus clowns kicked me," Kakazu told his partner, making him sweat. He didn't understand how he could have thought of such a thing. Hidan picked up a dirty old shoe and said, "But I still have this. The old building used to be a shoe factory, so it will just be fixed up." He said, "I don't see how a shoe can kill him." Kakazu laughed and kept counting his money. When Hidan saw the shoe in his hand, he threw it at a poor man who was walking by. He pulled up his scythe, which had the least amount of blood on its tip, and said, "No, this." It was finally time for him to kill Ryu. Hidan put his scythe to his tongue and licked the blood off of it, almost enjoying the taste. People who were in the area started to leave it very quickly. But not because of the two shinobi fighting. As someone who knew Bakudo, Kakazu was able to recognize the man's chakra signature. He was glad that Bakudo's signature wasn't nearby. He pulled one of his retractable spears out of his cloak and stabbed himself in the hand. He then let his blood drip onto the floor, turning it red. With his sharp eyes, Naruto could see a figure in the water. But the fog made it hard for him to see, but he decided it wasn't dangerous. Hidan pressed his foot against the blood and began to draw a triangle with 3 equal sides. Soon after that, Hidan's skin turned black and white spots showed up all over his body, making him look like a skeleton. "Yes, now Jashin, I give you a sacrifice," Hidan yelled as he raised his arms in honor of his god. Hidan yelled, "Kakazu, give me all your kunai." Kakazu huffed in anger, but he did what the loud man asked and gave him his kunai. Naruto raised an eyebrow at what he saw, but he didn't do anything to attack Hidan. Hidan rammed the sharp object into his stomach with his scythe while Naruto's blood was in his mouth. This made blood spurt out of his wounds. When Naruto looked down, he saw blood dripping down his cloak and a warm feeling coming from his stomach. He coughed up blood, but he didn't worry. There was no need to stress out. He doesn't care about wounds. Konan was watching what was going on and saw the red spots on Naruto's cloak. She knew what they meant, but she was also worried about other things. But chose not to think about it because now wasn't the right time. He said with his scythe still in his hand, "When you break through the pain, it becomes ecstasy." When he pulled out a kunai, he lightly hit him across the chest with it, cutting him badly. Naruto also got the same wound. Then Hidan stuck the kunai just under his right breast, and he loved every second of it. Along with the other person, Naruto got hurt where he looked down and saw the red spot on his cloak. Then he felt several holes in his body, and redness started to pool around his body. When he looked up again, he saw Hidan stabbing himself with kunai until he looked like a porcupine. Naruto chose not to let himself die of lack of blood. He was about to use a special skill that only he had. His own unique skill, one that didn't need the Sharingan. Oshi no Shuduan, teachings of the monastery, was Naruto's thought as he used his power. Suddenly, white mist appeared where his wounds should have been and covered him. They healed every wound in an instant, making it look like there was never a wound in the first place. Even the wound in his stomach was getting better quickly. That's right, Naruto didn't really have a jutsu. What he did have was an ability that let him heal almost any injury by using the life force he got from his parents when he was born. In order to get Oshi no Shuduan, Madara had to use the Sharingan or the Rinnegan, but anyone could still see how it worked. To put it simply, Naruto could control his own life force to heal his wounds and cuts.
He didn't have to use chakra to do this, and doing it to oneself didn't have any negative effects on the body.
Naruto could heal any wound and make it whole again in seconds, even if he had lost 2/3 of his body. One thing that was true, though, was that injuries that were more complicated took longer to heal. This was especially true for Naruto's eyes, which were the hardest to fix because they were made up of so many different parts. While Naruto had Oshi no Shuduan, he could not heal his brain because it was the control center for all of his body's functions and was too sensitive for healing. The brain's complicated structure also meant that it could not be prepared if Naruto was brain dead or had brain damage. This is because brain cells cannot be healed. He was lucky that the kunai he hit in the head didn't go all the way through his brain. If he hadn't used the ability before the hit, it wouldn't have healed the wound and the kunai would have gone right through his head. Naruto could also use this power on other people, but it would cost him something. After getting healed, Naruto sealed one of his sai and pulled out a metal dart on a string. He threw it at Hidan with amazing accuracy, and it pierced the follower of Jashin's shoulder and gave Naruto a small cut on the shoulder, but it healed in a second. Naruto pulled on the string so hard that it knocked Hidan off his feet. He then flew at Naruto and was kicked in the face by the blonde, breaking Hidan's nose and his pride. Hidan yelled, "Oh! Would you stop kicking me in the face?" He still looked like a skeleton. "That's it, let's end this with a finishing blow," Hidan said as he got out of the water and prepared to kill Naruto. Naruto gave in and sent chakra into his left eye, where his eternal Mangekyo appeared. Soon, ash began to gather around him, making it look like a cloud was hovering behind him. Naruto jumped into the air, and the ash did what he told it to do. It gave him a place to stand, and he jumped off the solidified ash cloud. Hidan then charged at him with his scythe ready to cut him down and kill him. As Naruto flew through the air, he got his waves of undulating ash ready. He made 3 streams out of the gray particles. When the two fighters were about to land a killing blow or attack that would hurt the other, time slowed down. But right before they were about to attack each other, a big thing came out of the water and charged at the 2 Akatsuki members. It had long, big, smooth, dark, gray-brown skin that didn't have any scales on it. It had pointy finlets on its back that went from its head to its tail. It has 7 cartilage structures with connective webbing and a big dorsal fin that sticks out from the top of its head. It has 4 yellow stripes on each side of its face. It has 16 teeth that fit together perfectly and are bright green. These teeth are strong enough to cut through metal. It also looks like a cat because it has 2 barbels on either side of its mouth. A person in Takigakure yelled, "It's the Unagi." At the same time, Naruto and Hidan walked right by each other without even looking at each other. They then both turned around and said. He yelled, "You're in the way. Get lost," as he slashed the Unagi across the face with his scythe. Nervously, Naruto told the giant eel, "You're in the way, get lost." He then directed his ash at it and hit it in the face. The unagi was pushed backwards by the wounds on its face, and it literally fell into the water, making huge waves and soaking the water with its blood. People in the village couldn't stand up to the unagi and stay alive, so everyone who was watching was speechless. But in just 2 seconds, these two men made it look like a child. After that, the two men looked at each other. Hidan almost dropped his scythe and said, "You know what, I'm tired. Can we keep going with this another time?" Naruto spoke as he turned off his left Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. "Yes, let's end this fight. I'm tired of it too," he said. His right Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan was still active. "Tell me, Hidan, are you the traitor to the organization?" Without a doubt, Hidan could hear a voice from hell. It was like a mix of screaming and nails hitting a chalkboard. "You will obey," the voice in Hidan's head said. It had every part of his body held against it. Its teeth were on his neck, its whispers were like bells in his ears, and its claws were deep into his flesh. Was this worry? Hidan spoke in a dull voice, "I am not a traitor, I have not thought of betraying the organization." He was doing what his master told him to do. The man with silver hair missed his chance. He was always controlled by Naruto. It was the Iron Fist subjugation of the Tyrant Emperor that was making him do what he was doing. Naruto could even talk through someone as if that person were real. For example, when Hidan said he was tired, Naruto was really saying those words through Hidan. When the unagi showed up, he was taken by it. He looked into Ryu's eyes for a split second, but to Naruto, it seemed like it was all the time in the world. Naruto told him, "Go, don't kill anyone, do what you want until I need you." He then turned off his Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. They both walked away from the water and went back to their partners. There wasn't much that Kakazu cared about, but he did heal Hidan's wounds. Konan, on the other hand, hadn't known how she felt since Obito. Kakazu had booked a hotel room for all 4 of them hours before Naruto arrived. He was wearing black shoes and business pants, but there was nothing on his middle. He had to beat Bakudo to get all of his money back when the tournament was over. That didn't bother him, though. Because he trained with Madara, Naruto learned a lot about himself, his past, and who he really was. One of those shocking things, though, was etched into his skin. Something that could not be taken away or washed away. He felt chakra flow into his left arm as he looked down at it. Where something showed up on his arm. It was 5 straight lines that went down his arm from his shoulder to just above his wrist. The lines were dark black and had a square on each end. The squares on the lines near his shoulder faced left, while the squares on the lines near his wrist faced right. He was sure of what was on his skin because it was something he had seen before. This is a Juinjutsu, our cursed seal. He didn't know why, but he was practicing controlling his chakra when he found the feet on his body. Neither he nor Madara could figure out what it meant. They did learn that it stopped something in his body, but they were still not sure what it did. Naruto heard a knock from behind him, so he stopped the flow of chakra and the Juinjutsu went away. He quickly put on what he still had on. He wore the same black gloves, a black shirt, and a yellow tie. As he fixed his jacket a bit and opened his door, he saw something that looked a lot like an angel. Konan was wearing a navy blue dress with one strap and a hole by her left leg. The dress didn't hide much of her body, maybe to make her look more sexual for the sex. Obsessed people who would be looking at her. The eyeshadow she usually wears is lavender, but she also had on a shade of blue lipstick that looked like it cost a lot, so she probably paid for it with Naruto's money. Naruto couldn't put his finger on it, but he felt drawn to her. Her body, the way it moved, and the way her eyes looked were all very beautiful. Either she was a woman or she was more powerful than him. She also had on the hair clips he gave her for her birthday and the paper flowers him gave her. While Naruto was taking off her clothes, Konan told him, "Eyes on the mission, not my breasts." The blonde snapped back to reality and left the room with Konan. She wrapped her arms around his and told him that they would blend in even more if they looked like a couple. There were people from all over the world at the gambling tournament when they got there. Each with a unique look and dress. There were guys, girls, fat people, thin people, rich women, and everyone else with money. After making their way to a bar inside the casino, Naruto and Konan saw Kakazu, who looked less like a rag doll and more like a person. Naruto sat down next to Konan in one of the empty chairs and said, "Kakazu. Hello, you two." The tournament doesn't start for another hour or so, and Hidan is in his hotel room sharpening his. I don't know what he was sharpening, but I know it's sharp, Conan said. Neither Naruto nor Conan looked at him funny. Bakuto will show up any moment now. Hopefully your little spar with Hidan didn't scare him off, Ryu. Naruto replied, Hidan attacked, I defended. That's all I'm going to say about that. Hidan wasn't the traitor, so Naruto didn't care much about him. As Conan left the two men, she told them, don't start a riot. I'm going to look around. Men was following her around. Naruto and Kakazu shivered. Would they really start a riot without her? Naruto spoke up and caught Kakazu's attention while he was cleaning wine glasses for his customers. Kakazu, I need to ask you something. I have been given the recent mission of hunting down a traitor to the organization. Hidan has proven to not be a traitor, but I don't know about you. Kakazu looked at his blonde-haired friend and said, well, I'm not talking, unless for a price. He saw the person who was using the Sharingan. The person was wearing red contact lenses at the time. Naruto took out a suitcase and laid down in front of Kakazu. Kakazu opened the suitcase and saw a green light that looked like a lot of money. There had to be 30 million in that suitcase alone. Okay, this was a really simple and easy way to get someone to agree with you. Naruto gave Kakazu a funny look as he took the suitcase away and said, no, I'm not a traitor. Unlike Orochimaru, I'm smart. I'm happy to do business with you, Naruto said. I know what to do from now, just let me handle it. Except what kind of game does the gambling tournament circle around? Kakazu said, you'll find out. There he is. This made Naruto look back over his shoulder. He saw Bakuto Poka there. Shinobi who steals and lies. Bakuto was a tall man with blue eyes that were the same shade as Naruto's old eyes. His hair was platinum blonde and cut in a Caesar style. He had a beard that was the same color as his hair. Several types of earrings, from hoops to studs, were worn over his eyes. And he was just putting on an all-white business suit and tying his tie. Two women, one redhead on his left arm and one brunette on his right, were standing next to him. His clothes, his body language, and even the way he yelled, asshole. That's all Naruto did. He looked at him like he always did. Not interested in what was going on around him. After that, he saw Conan walk up to him in a bright blue dress. She walked up to him and began nibbling on his earlobe. The blonde had to hold back a moan at her current form. But Naruto knew she was going to be his date for the evening, so this behavior wasn't totally out of the blue for him. Do your part and keep your poker face up. The game is easy and you'll figure it out in no time. Just let me do my thing, and we'll be fine, Conan whispered to Naruto between nibbling on his ear. He quickly figured out what she was talking about. She would cheat the game with her paper powers so Bakuto would lose all his money. Then, they would go home rich while leaving the thief's body in a ditch. As she sat down next to him, Conan said, good luck. A loudspeaker said, will all contestants make their way to the gambling table? Repeat, all contestants make their way to the gambling table. Before Naruto left the bar to take his place, he had an idea. His head moved closer to Conan's until there was a small space between them. Ryu kissed Conan, but Conan didn't realize she felt a soft touch on her lips until it was too late. Even though it was pure and quick, it had an effect on her. It felt like lightning bolts were shooting through her and euphoria filled her mind with fog. The last time they kissed, she started it, but this time it was clear that the roles were switched. Then she felt her partner bite off her lips. It took him a moment to whisper in her ear. He quickly left to take a seat by the gambling table and said, that was a thank you. As Conan watched his figure move away, she brought her fingers to her lips, almost as if she missed the feeling of the action. He thanked her for wishing him luck, which she now knew. Sometimes people would thank others for the smallest things, but those little things made everyone's lives better. Naruto still didn't know what kind of gambling game he was going to be playing. He remembered that it involved cards, but he wasn't sure what the rules were or how to act. He wouldn't have to worry about it though because Conan would be helping him with the game. And Bakuto Poka, his target, was sitting right across from the blonde, who was talking to one of his female friends at the time, which didn't bother the golden blonde at all. When the game's announcer showed up, he or she was only wearing a suit. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 15th annual Takigakure Uno tournament, said the announcer. There was a shocked look on Naruto's face. He then turned to another player and asked if this was a real Uno tournament, which got a yes answer from his opponent. For those who don't know what Uno is, Naruto, it's a game where you have to match cards. The winner is the first person to lose all of their cards. Naruto looked like a fish with its mouth open. This was not at all what he had expected. He had been watching moves and learning the rules to Power and other gambling games. He wasn't even sure if Uno was a gambling game. He thought he would be one of those movie spies who was also a poker genius. He had no idea what this would turn out to be. He then went to find the dealer and helped her mix the cards. Then he turned to look at Conan, who was drinking wine at the time. She winked at him as she was supposed to, and even though he didn't talk to many women, besides Conan and May, he knew that meant something. He looked at his cards to see if any of the colors and numbers matched. If they did, it would help him win the game. He looked at Conan again, but this time she was facing away from him. He knew she must have messed with the game with her paper powers, maybe by making fake cards to help him win. Kanan thought, sometimes he's like a lost puppy without me. But she couldn't blame him. Naruto knew very little about the world besides war and shinobi matters. He was like a lost puppy in every other way. A voice over said, "Let the 15th annual Uno tournament begin." As the dealer steered the game between the players. He had played this stupid game for hours and hours. The tournament was now down to the same number of people who started it. No one had won yet, and it didn't look like anyone would soon. Bakuto looked like she was so happy she could kiss her crush. Naruto felt like he had lost all faith in this mission and thought everything he was doing was very stupid. He wished Itachi were in his place instead of him because he wanted to die again just to stop this stupid game. He really wanted to die again. But Bakuto wouldn't give up. He kept making Naruto draw cards so he wouldn't win the game. The shinobi thief liked making Naruto so bored while playing the game. And finally, he had one yellow card left with the number 2 on it. Did he put it on the pile where all the other cards went? If so, he won the game. Naruto broke the fourth wall and said, "I think I know why the writer skipped over all of the game. He's lazy and just wants to finish it up so he can post this new chapter." Surprisingly, only 2 other people had already figured this out. The announcer shouted, "We have a winner," and quickly gave Naruto the scroll that held the 900 million Ryo prize. Bakuto sighed and got up from the table. He was secretly very worried because he had just lost all his money in the game. Naruto slouched out of his chair and started Phase 2 of his mission. Konan and Kakazu, seeing Ryu move against Bakuto, did the same and started following the thief to the roof of the building. While Naruto was on the roof, he still had on his black suit because he hadn't changed. He saw Bakuto leaning against a railing and looking up at the stars. Naruto pulled a kunai out of his sleeve, charged it with wind chakra to make it more powerful, and threw it at Bakuto. It went straight through the man's head and hit the ground with a loud thud. At that moment, Konan and Kakazu joined him. They both looked happy that the mission was over. At the very end, when Naruto finally sensed the hidden chakra, he saw big cards the size of people circle around Konan and Kakazu. Then, Bakuto appeared in a puff of smoke in front of Naruto. When the man snapped his fingers, Konan and Kakazu were gone, and Bakuto was just standing there with a smirk that was making everyone mad. Naruto said in a sad tone, "I knew it wouldn't be that easy to kill you." Bakuto said with a snap of his fingers, "I'd rather we just skip the formalities." Bakuto did some hand seals for a jutsu that Naruto didn't know. With a point of his finger, Bakuto said, "Gyanbaru Kado Saikoro Henge, gambling cards dice transformation." Naruto then turned into dice, with his face on one of the sides. Naruto thought, what the fuck just happened? As he jumped around like dice. However, the blonde found that he could still move around a little. Gyanbaru Kado Resho, gambling cards laceration, Bakuto said as cards flew out of the sleeve of his jacket and hit Naruto, who quickly rolled away as a dice. From what little he could see as a dice, it looked like the cards were cutting through the concrete roof like swords, and when he rolled away, they followed him. The blonde looked like she was about to sigh because of what was going on around him. He hoped that this dice change wouldn't last forever. Naruto jumped around to avoid the cards for a few minutes, and Bakuto looked like he was having fun. But Bakuto liked to end things quickly, like when he won a game or a battle. He also liked to leave quickly. But he was very aware of who he was dealing with. He read about Ryu Yokazi in the most recent bingo book. The man is famous all over the world for making trouble very quickly. Either he made trouble or trouble found him. No matter which one it was. It didn't really matter. He still thought he could win this fight. But time was of the essence right now. For the reason that Ryu was getting used to his cube shape, Bakuto would use one of his sneaky moves to catch the Akatsuki agent off guard. By snapping his fingers, Bakuto changed Ryu back to his original form, which caught the Akatsuki member off guard. As soon as Ryu was back in his normal body, he felt strange. But he couldn't think about that right now because razor-shaped playing cards were flying at him, ready to kill him. He did say, though, that moving his arms and legs again felt strange and numb at the same time. Naruto used his Sharingan to extract some shuriken from his seals and threw them at the cards. The wind-enhanced shuriken easily cut through the cards' weapons. Naruto then took off his glasses and untied his tie. He then stared at Bakuto, trying to figure out what kind of skills he had. He imbues his card with his chakra, making it sharper and harder. Since Kakazu and Konan were caught by those cards, he can probably also make them bigger. He also uses gambling-related ninjutsu, like dice. When he turned me into dice, he had to be pointing at someone. The jutsu cast time is quick, but it's easy to avoid for someone who knows what's coming, so he won't use it again because he knows I won't fall for the same trick twice unless luck is on his side. Based on his physique, I think he likes fighting from a distance. He's probably not very good at taijutsu, but I would expect him to know a lot about the art. But his card ninjutsu has some problems, but Naruto didn't think about them right away. I'll have to make do with what I have, and I need to be careful, because he might use Konan and Kakazu as hostages against me, he thought as he studied his enemy. Naruto took out the black blade, Tanbogiri. No. Tsurugi, which is his favorite and most powerful weapon. Bakuto pulled out more cards from his sleeve and threw them at Naruto. Naruto easily cut them with the Tanbogiri and kept running at Bakuto, who then pulled out 2 cards the size of people to defend himself. Naruto hit the cards with the Tanbogiri and found that the gambling tools were very dense because all he did was scratch them. This surprised the blonde because the Tanbogiri was very good at cutting through things. Naruto jumped back and threw some kunai at Bakuto, who still had his cards up. This time, though, Bakuto wasn't even scratched. Naruto looked at the man with narrow Sharingan eyes. Those were the same cards that took Kakazu and Konan. Naruto figured out that Bakuto didn't make the cards bigger. Instead, he had 2 kinds of cards, some were small and light, and others were big and dense. He must have been taking his cards out of a seal that looked a lot like Naruto's. Since those cards moved quickly, Naruto stabbed the Tanbogiri into the ground and began to prepare one of his jutsus. Naruto spoke, Raiden, Kaminari Yashi, lightning release Thunder Palm, as he held his hands out in front of him and lightning shot out of them. When Bakuto saw the lightning coming, he got out his defense cards. They blocked the attack, but when they hit the ground, they set off a small explosion that sent him rolling across the concrete. When Bakuto turned over to face the sky, he saw Naruto coming down from the sky with the Tanbogi ready to stab him. With quick thinking and quick wit, Bakuto pulled out one of his defense cards. This time, though, it was stronger than the last one. When Naruto looked at the card, just before he hit the ground, he stopped stabbing the card with his blade. The unique thing about this card was that Naruto could see Konan looking back at him from inside it. With wide eyes, she was trying to figure out what was going on between them. Bakuto tried to attack Naruto again, but Naruto jumped away from the card. Naruto had to praise Bakuto for using such a weak trick, even though it was a cheap one. Naruto didn't want to hurt Konan or Kakazu, so Bakuto would have the best defense possible with it. When Konan was done, Bakuto got back up and threw away the card that held him. He now knew that he had something Naruto didn't have that he could use against Naruto. Then Bakuto called up 4 normal-sized playing cards and threw them at Naruto, who used his Sharingan to guess what would happen. Instead of dodging or countering with his own tools, Naruto quickly and skillfully grabbed the cards out of the air, spun them around without losing speed, and threw them back at Bakuto. Bakuto was startled by what was happening, but he quickly woke up and put his arms in front of his face to protect himself. The cards just missed him, tearing up parts of his suit and giving him cuts and scrapes, including one on his cheek. After seeing everything, Naruto was surprised by something. He knew that the cards worked like his Hayden, Ash release, and that someone sneaky enough might be able to use his Ash against him since it did what he said it would do. But that didn't happen to Bakudo. Instead, he tried to stay safe from the tools he could control. Finally, that's the bad thing. Bakudo could be attacked with his own cards, even though his chakra was infusing them, if someone else had them. Naruto said, but this was an interesting flaw in the Shinobi Thief's cards and ninjutsu style. Because Bakudo didn't call up his defense cards, those cards couldn't defend themselves against other cards either. Those cards were the only thing that could really hurt them. That weakness is awful, man. But Naruto didn't win just because he knew this. Bakudo would be even more careful about how this battle goes since he must also know this. Naruto wouldn't use Hayden because it was mostly offensive and not defensive, and even Naruto would admit that it was hard to control because he would have to guide each particle blade that made up the Ash, which is something he could do wrong. Yes, even someone as good as him would make mistakes sometimes. In an effort to keep his cool about what was going on, Bakudo thought of a way to use one of his jutsu to confuse and attack Naruto, which might have given him the upper hand in this fight. Bakudo spoke, Gyanbaru Kado Odoroki Jakupoto, gambling card surprise jackpot, as many of his life. Sized forms began to circle around him. He disappeared before Naruto could notice. It didn't take the blonde long to figure out that he had hidden himself among his cards to surprise him. But he could only see the backs of the cards, which were blank except for a single pattern. The cards moved around him in a circle, going around and through each other. He jumped away from them, but the cards followed him and only showed the back of the thick piece of paper. Naruto could feel small cards to his left that would have stabbed him if the Tanbogiri hadn't been able to cut through the very strong paper. He looked again to see where those attacks were coming from, but all he could see were the cards moving. It did it again, but this time to his right. He knew that he couldn't always protect himself from the cards, and he knew that using Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan techniques too quickly could drain his chakra. Still, though, Naruto put more chakra into his Sharingan to look for a bigger chakra source among the cards. He found 3 big sources, one of which belonged to Bakuto and the other 2 to Konan and Kakazu. He took out his Tanbogiri and quickly cut through the card Bakudo was hiding in. This was possible because his chakra wasn't as strong as Konan's or Kakazu's. Bakudo was shocked when Ryu found him faster than he thought. Naruto's sword cut him in the chest, leaving a big wound. Before he could attack Naruto, he jumped away and flew at him, trying to cut him up. Naruto, on the other hand, jumped into the air, twisted his body, and let the cards pass by him. He was able to avoid the attacks and catch a glimpse of Kakazu in one of the cards. He hit the ground again and rolled backwards, then threw the Tanbogiri at Bakudo, who just barely avoided it. What he didn't expect, though, was for the Tanbogiri to twist in the air and come back at him, trying to slash him again. Back dove just in time to save his head before it was almost cut off. He was on the ground and couldn't get away easily. Then he felt a shadow over him. When he turned around, Naruto was coming down on him with the Tanbogiri, ready to cut him in half. Since Bakudo couldn't avoid the sword, he pulled out one of his defense cards, which neither Konan nor Kakazu were in at the time. With great speed, Naruto jumped up in the air with the Tanbogiri still on the card. He then repositioned the tip of the sword and put all of his weight on it, which made it pierce through the card and stab Bakudo in the shoulder, making him scream in pain. Naruto jumped off the sword, which was still stuck in the card, and did some hand seals to get ready for a wind jutsu that could kill Bakudo. Futon. Kei's Hain Dongan no Jutsu, Wind Release, Wind Feather Bullet Technique. Naruto yelled as he blew out many wind bullets in the shape of feathers that flew at very high speeds and hit Bakudo right in the face. The gambler had no choice but to use a defensive card to protect himself from the wind feathers, but it didn't help much because the feathers were able to easily go through the card. When the cards hit the ground, Naruto took them off and saw that there was no body of Bakudo there at all. Naruto thought that he must have found safety inside the card and then switched places with someone else to stay safe. Naruto quickly found his opponent trying to sneak off on top of the roof using the card he used to avoid his attack. It wasn't a very good disguise since the opponent was walking around like a giant card. Naruto quickly popped out from behind the card and stabbed it with his black sword. Naruto, on the other hand, saw through the plan. He quickly and skillfully took the Tanbogiri from the card, and the card itself burst into smoke. He then placed the end of the pommel on the sole of his shoe with such skill and timing that when Naruto kicked his foot, it worked like an extension of himself, allowing him to stab Bakuto in the chest when the man was trying to sneak up on him. Naruto controlled his chakra by tree climbing, which was the only thing Kakashi Hatake taught him. This allowed him to keep the sword on his foot. For Naruto, though, it was even better because he used his Kenjutsu style in it. By coming up with a style that was only in his mind. Kenjutsu is a way to fight with your feet. Naruto would use basic chakra control to keep the sword's pommel in place. This way, he could do jutsu without putting the sword down. Even Madara said he had never thought of such a clever way to use both jutsu and kenjutsu at the same time. Even he said he wasn't quick enough to use something like that. It wasn't as easy as it sounded because you had to be very dexterous and flexible to do it. To use the style of fighting, Naruto would have to use more than just his legs. Bakuto, who had a sword in his chest, coughed a little, but there was no blood. Naruto could tell it was a copy because it broke up into many small cards. After that, he saw the big defensive cards moving around on the ground. After that, Bakuto came out of the cards, his clothes stained with blood, holding two of his huge cards like swords and having two more float around him ready to attack Naruto. They got into a fight with swords and cards. The blonde had a lot more experience with Kenjutsu than Bakuto, who had never really done it before. Even though Bakuto had two other cards that helped him win the sword fight, it wasn't enough. Even worse, he couldn't read the attack line or pattern because he had never seen a sword style like that before. He didn't even know there was such a style until now. He had a few more tricks up his sleeve that might have given him the edge he needed, but he had to use them just right for them to work. Bakuto blocked the blonde's next sword attack and jumped back to get some distance. He looked at his wounds and saw that they were deep but not life-threatening. As long as he ended this quickly and didn't waste his chakra in vain, he might be able to make it out of this alive. Bakuto did more works on his hands to get a jutsu. We hope Ryu couldn't figure this one out. Gyanbaru Kado Saki means luck with gambling cards, Bakuto said using one of his strongest moves. And soon it was twice as big and wide as before. Men were circling Naruto, and each of them was flashing a X or a O at fast and random intervals. Bakuto, who wasn't in the cards, said, "Win the game and you win." The technique was one of a kind because the person caught in it had to pick the right mix of X's and O's to stay alive. Naruto was using his Sharingan to try to figure out what was going on and what the big letters meant. He knew it was a code, but he didn't know what it was. But that was his real goal at the time. He chose a O, then a X, and then two more O's while watching the jutsu work. However, it had the opposite effect and one of the big cards shot flying kunai. Naruto thought that no one was looking at him at the moment. His strongest defensive jutsu was used along with his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. Susanoo, a white skeletal ribcage surrounded him and protected him from the attack. Naruto was afraid of what would happen if people found out that he had the Mangekyo Sharingan and the Eternal. He didn't need the trouble right now. He turned off his Susanoo and looked back at the cards in his hand once the kunai stopped shooting at him. Then he chose two XS and two OS, thinking about how forces can work together or against each other. He might have chosen that pattern because he liked it. When he chose those cards, all the big ones started softly falling to the ground. This was such a stupid jutsu that he thought even a child could figure it out. He just threw the cards at Bakuto, who was already badly hurt and gasping for air. The cards cut Bakuto up, leaving him with more wounds. Not so for Naruto. The way he was fighting, he thought he could keep going for days on end. He was interested in what kind of trick Bakuto would use next, and he was pretty sure it would have something to do with his gambling. Bakuto felt like he had no other choice but to use his trump card, haha. I'm not sure if that was supposed to be a pun or not. Bakuto used hand seals to find his most powerful jutsu, one that would help him win. He had to be smart with his cards, in a way, so he could at least get away alive. He knew he couldn't beat Ryu if this jutsu didn't work. The Ma was too strong and smart for him, and he quickly figured out where his ninjutsu was weak and how he should fight. The Sharingan could read a lot more than just ninjutsu in movements. Bakuto spoke, and a lot of cards flew out of his sleeve and started changing sizes. He said, Gyanbaru Kado, Lano Kado, gambling cards, house of cards. They began to pile on top of each other, making a house of cards that took up most of the roof's space. Naruto used his Sharingan to see that the cards had a lot of chakra building up inside them, and some of them had even more chakra. This led him to think that Kakazu and Konan must also be in the house of cards. While the cards were stacking, they also piled on top of him, making it impossible for him to see the world above. When he turned around, he saw that thick stacks of papers were all around him. He felt like Bakuto was in one of the small rooms inside the house, even though he looked like he was at the base of the house. Another strange thing was that there were many exits that Naruto could just walk through. The thought of it made him raise an eyebrow. Why use so much chakra on this jutsu if your enemy can just break out of it and attack? As he walked up to one of the holes and put his hand over it, Naruto was surprised to feel something solid and unseen press against his hand. A barrier, Naruto thought, as he used a clever technique to trap his enemies and stop them from getting away. He barely had time to raise his sword before one of the cards on his sides shot out a kunai. Seeing something like that made him narrow his eyes in suspicion. He then raised his sword again to block another kunai from a different card. He rolled away just as Bakuto was about to hit him from above, his instincts to stay alive taking over. Naruto's body crashed into a card because he was a little distracted, but he seemed to move to a different part of the house. When he saw his strange escape, Naruto raised an eyebrow. I think this jutsu uses barrier ninjutsu and a weak form of teleportation to let him pass through his cards. Naruto thought this as he picked up a card at random. He pressed his hand against the card so hard that it looked like something was swallowing him. After that, something hit him in the head and hand. When he looked up, his hand was stick out from the card above him. He still had that sad, empty look on his face. He snapped his finger, and the hand from another dimension snapped its finger too. He told the hand to scratch something, and from above, it did so on the top of his hair. He took his hand off the card and looked at it as if it were something new to him. He put his hand back on the card and looked up to see that his hand wasn't sticking out of that card. It takes you to a different place in the house each time you phase through the cards, Naruto figured out by looking at how the jutsu worked. He looked up and saw Bakuto phase through one of the cards in front of him. With quick reflexes and his Sharingan, he blocked Bakuto's attack and threw him over his shoulder while Bakuto was flying through another card. After a short break, Naruto looked around him. He took 2 kunai out of his wrist seals and threw them at the cards that were close to him. He opened up more and did it again. Then he heard a wounded shout, which meant Bakuto was hurt because it sounded like Bakuto. He rushed through one of the cards and saw Bakuto holding his hurt arm, which had a kunai in it. When the gambler saw his opponent, he also went through the cards to get away. Naruto, knowing it would be hard to catch him, jumped into the air and went through another card to try to stop Bakuto from getting away. Naruto left a card and phased through another one on the left to try to catch Bakuto. It was him again, on his knees and panting with pain when Naruto found him. Naruto quickly moved between them and kicked Bakuto in the knee, breaking the man's leg and causing him to vomit blood. Naruto then hit Bakuto on the left side of the torso with an elbow, breaking his ribs and causing the bones to get stuck in his lungs. The card house that had trapped them both quickly started to break down and float to the ground safely. Naruto, who was high up in the house, gracefully landed on the ground. He heard a thud where Bakuto had landed and couldn't move or speak because he was choked on blood. Naruto took out the Tonbogiri and charged at the gambler. The gambler called up his defense cards and made a circle around him. Naruto, on the other hand, slashed by and cut the cards in half. Bakuto, who was on the other side, was cut in half across the chest, and his bloody body parts slid off like liquid and fell to the ground. 2 cards showed up in front of Naruto and spun around, showing him Konan and Kakazu's forms. To start a conversation, Kakazu said, "Well, that was." She brushed a loose piece of blue hari off her face and said, "Annoying." Her face showed that she was annoyed. "Just be happy that you're still alive," Naruto told her, because he didn't want to deal with any more annoying small talk right now. When Kakazu saw Bakuto's dead body, he quickly ran over, cut the head off at the shoulders, and sealed it in a scroll. He only needed the head, but the body would have been better, but Ryu went ahead and cut him anyway. "The money we won from Bakuto has been sent to the bank account of the Akatsuki. We no longer need you here." This is what Kakazu told Konan and Ryu. "Try Kuro Urumaki, Black Knight Town, if you want a place to stay that is friendly, easy, and cheap. That place isn't too far away, and Konoha no longer keeps their patrol cars there." The words of Kakazu got a nod from Konan and a blank look from Ryu. Kakazu left them, and soon after, Naruto and Konan also left. Someone was far away, among the leaves and trees, watching what was going on through a telescope. Even the smartest sensors could not reach them. The man was hidden by his pink hair and Konoha flak jacket. A look of surprise crossed the man's face, though, as he stood there with his mouth open. The blonde man he had been looking at for a while gave him that look. "Are you that? Say, Tekurufu. Takigakure, what a jerk," Naruto thought as he walked through the well-known hidden village. Since he had already been in the village for 3 days, he was stupidly wondering when the party would end. He didn't really feel anything other than irritation at the people around him. He saw them as beings under his feet. He knew he was powerful, so the threats of others didn't bother him. Zetsu said he had a god complex, but Naruto knew that was silly because pride in one's power led to arrogance and maybe even death. Still, he had to drag himself through the streets looking for something to do. He hadn't killed anyone yet, so there was no reason for him to kill anyone. Without a reason, there was no need to do anything. Even though the people Orochimaru killed were locked up like animals in a zoo, he killed them because they would have been caught even if they managed to get away. There was a reason to kill them. And that's what he hated, not having a reason for being and not being needed by anyone. Everyone else had a reason for being, like being born, living, and dying. He said that was the general purpose of all living things, and he applied it to that equation as well. But what people do before they die too soon is focus their life on something they want, like pursuing their dream. Some people never get what they were looking for, while others do. Naruto was just the eye in the moon. He had no purpose at all. But he didn't think he was important to the plan. He saw himself as a small part of it. It's up to you to decide if this was because of his unhealthy thoughts or because his mind was so broken. He remembered what the old woman had said. She told him about the two lovers and their magic lanterns and how if you looked into one and closed your eyes, you would find what was most important to you. It didn't matter if what she said was true or not. It made him think, infinite Tsukuyomi. What was he trying to achieve by planning to do this? He wanted to bring peace by forcing it to give in to him, but he knew that peace could never be he had no idea what to do. It was too much for him to handle. He didn't know the answer and never would unless he found something important to him. The Uzumaki had been having strange thoughts and a strong desire for something. At first, he thought it was just lust and want, but he knew it was more than that. He tried to deny that something important to him was there, as if what he was looking for was right around the corner. He thought he wasn't worthy or that it didn't bother him. Many times, he had missed out on the chances that life offered. He knew that what you wish for never comes true, and the only thing that comes with it is despair. He missed his chance at life when he was made Jinchuriki, his chance at love when he became a genin, and his chance at happiness when he died. All of these missed chances were making him feel very sad. Then Infinite Tsukuyomi realized that he wanted to go back to that dream world and get back what had been taken from him and lost. There was no doubt that the blonde was emotionally dead. He wore it on his face like it was makeup. It was his wish to feel happiness, sadness, and anger all over again. He wanted to feel all of those things again. He needed and wanted that. He didn't care about anything but feeling. He didn't know how he lost his emotions, but he thought that the cursed seal on his arm helped a little. Whoever put it on him must have known what they were doing, and that person probably knew something he wasn't supposed to. Madara didn't put it on him. Madara wasn't very good at Fuinjutsu or Juinjutsu. Someone else did it, but Naruto couldn't think of anyone who could have done it. He had to answer his own questions and deal with his partner, Akatsuki, at the same time. An assassin was also after his head. Especially Konoha, they wanted him dead and their blood to cover the ground. He had already killed 2 of their shinobi, 2 friends from his old life, and he didn't feel bad about it. If it helped Eye of the Moon, then so be it. But he needed more power. Even with Kamiyonanio, Madara could still beat him, and Naruto would still be able to challenge him. He needed more power. He didn't have much time for anything because he was waiting for orders from Nagato to go on another mission, which he really wanted. He still had to find the traitor in the Akatsuki, and he had a good idea of who it was because he had already sent one of his clones made from the Kamiyonanio to talk to Deidara and Sasori. When he said, "Speak," he really meant, itch his way into their minds and turn them into tools and puppets for him to use. It was Hidan and Deidara who were already under his spell. Kisame, Sasori, and Kakazu were following him because he was helpful, but Konan was still the wild card. She was pledged to Nagato forever, so she wouldn't easily follow Naruto. When we talk about Konan, things had been. As strange as it seemed, the 2 of them were more like good friends than partners. Naruto had a hard time making friends. There was tension between them, but he didn't know what kind. He did know that they were physically attracted to each other, that much was certain. To put it simply, they both wanted to bang each other, but it seemed like it was out of lust. Naruto couldn't feel anything for anyone, he never tried to. At first, he just saw Konan as his toy, someone he could use to get what he wanted. But he thought they had different feelings. Konan wasn't stupid. She knew she wasn't easy to control, she had spent all that time with Obito, who was a mastermind at controlling the human mind. He could have easily controlled her with Kamiyoniniyo, but he didn't want to. Naruto was the type of person who would do anything to get his thought across. Konan didn't think he should do anything to her, though. She was still like a flower, innocent and pure until its petals die. The woman with blue hair still had petals on her flower. He still didn't feel anything, but this restraint was tearing at his mind like an animal biting on its bars. He didn't know. That woman was one of the sneakiest people he had ever met. She was slippery like an eel and you never knew what she was thinking, just like a fast animal. In that way, she was a lot like him. He then felt a presence, and his senses got stronger. He could feel Konan's large and cool chakra reserves, as well as the fact that her chakra and body had fully adjusted to the gift he gave her. It was now only a matter of time before she could use it without any limits. With the Uzumaki chakra he had given her and her strong cells, she should be able to easily get used to the new chakra. Of course, her levels had gone up, but she hadn't noticed yet. He was interested in how long it would take her to wake up the magic in her body. It didn't matter. The power up he gave her might make her mad as well as happy. Then he saw her walking around the village without her Akatsuki cloak on. She was wearing the paper flower he had bought her as a birthday gift in her hair and the paper clips he had given her. The lantern's light seemed to shine off her pale skin, giving her a radiant look, and her eyeshadow added a level of magic that Naruto had not seen before. Through and through, she was a beautiful sight. Like the other times, she was looking around the village, maybe looking for souvenirs to remember her time in Taki. The sight hurt his heart because they had to leave soon for their next mission. Hidan and Kakazu had already left for their own mission, leaving Naruto and Konan alone in Taki. The village would soon find out that Ryu Yokazi was among them, but the famous shinobi was already doing his best not to be seen. He could tell the sun was going down soon because it was making an auburn haze in the sky. The clouds were reddish-orange, and the sun was losing a lot of its shine. It was beautiful, but strange. He never watched the sunset because he was too busy taking over the world to notice. But after leaving the mountain's graveyard, he saw the world with a new perspective. He sometimes questioned whether infinite Tsukuyomi was the right choice. He remembered that in the land of waves, an old weapon dealer had given him a few simple words, but they were full of wisdom that only a few have ever said. The words made him think that maybe there was another way, that maybe people weren't doomed to hate each other like he thought, and that maybe the world couldn't be forced to find peace and understanding. But all he could see was that even if everyone did nice things for no reason, the world would still not be at peace. But for now, he was happy to just watch Konan walk through the village while the festival was still going on. She had a smile on her face as she looked at all the knobs and tinker tools, the jewelry, and the brightly colored clothes. He could see the enchantment on her face in every muscle movement, all 40. 2 muscles moving together to make a smile. He could see everything with his Sharingan. The lanterns on strings gave the area a sense of mystery and peace. He thought about what the woman had said about the lanterns again. He decided it wouldn't hurt to give it a try since he didn't think it would reveal anything. Then he had an idea that needed 2 people. He was sure of what he was going to do. He hoped Konan enjoyed it too. What he was about to do was very out of character for him. A month ago, he probably would never have done something like this. But talking to Konan had changed his view of the people around him, especially Konan. She was a lot like him in that they both hid their feelings and thoughts. The blonde man, on the other hand, didn't have any feelings to hide, so they were calm. When it came to caring about other people, Konan was much better than Naruto. So Naruto did something. He slowly walked up to Konan so as not to scare her. Konan felt a presence coming up behind her. She had felt this presence before. She had been traveling with it for months, so she knew it meant no harm.
The person in question was a man who could be kind when he wanted to be.
She saw him mostly as a question that had to be answered in order to find out all of his secrets. She was interested in everything around her, like a cat, and it was clear that she was interested in the man.
Once she was done, she turned around to find her partner, Ryu Yokaze, whose real name is Naruto Uzumaki.
He used to be a Konoha ninja in the Jinchuriki to the strongest tailed beast, the Kyuubi no Yoko. The fox was so strong that even the Shoden Hokage shook when he had to fight it. Naruto was one of the smartest and sneakiest men she had ever met. He was like a two-legged secret. Everything he did was to get better and get ready for battle, and he wore a veil of lies and deceit that could fool anyone. His silver tongue was the sharpest thing on his body. Naruto spoke with a straight face and said, "Conan." But what was interesting about the face was that Naruto's eyes weren't half closed like they usually were, which made him look bored everywhere he went. He seemed interested in something this time, which to Conan was like the end of the world. "I wish to ask something of you."
As soon as she came back to reality, she paid attention to what he was saying and how his lips were moving.
"And that maybe?" Conan asked carefully, because most of the time when Naruto asked her a question, he was asking her to take part in an experiment to make her stronger or do something else. "Today is the last day of the Ikiranten, Spirit Lantern, Festival, and I'd like to ask you to join me while I go out on the lake to observe their customs. I believe it would be more enjoyable to have company while all these people are having fun with their friends and family while they waste their time on inappropriate and offensive activities," Naruto said, looking over his shoulder to see people having fun together. "They also say that the festival is more magical when shared with a partner, and since you're the only person in the village that I feel emotionally connected to," Conan spoke up and cut him off in the middle of his thought. "All you have to say is, do you want to join me?" Conan asked with a small smile. Ryu was never the right person for the job when it came to some things. Naruto let out a sigh of frustration at what she said. Ever since she asked him to join them, he had never been so kind. "Thank you. Meet me at the docks in 2 hours. There will be a gondola waiting for you there, and you'll know which one it is because I'll be there," Naruto said with a small bow. He then left with an eyebrow twitching in irritation, this time at himself for making a simple gesture too long. Kanan's smile never got a little bigger. Maybe Ryu wasn't such a machine after all. He didn't have to know it, but he could be kind when he wanted to be. It was dark, and the star's light was blocked by clouds. In the middle of the night, the moon stood tall, shining its pale light into the world. Its aura was dark and cold, and few people could understand how big it was and what it looked like. In a tall building in Omegakure that belonged to someone who had broken into the village many times, the rain was pounding hard on the metal of the tower, making it sound like war drums riding off into battle. Inside the tower, it was cold, the pipes were leaking, and you could see your warm breath clearly. There were 6 chairs in the room grouped around a table. The dim lighting didn't show anything, but the silhouettes of the people there made them look very serious. This wasn't the time to be joking around. In spite of that, someone brought a fruitcake to the meeting. One of the figures who wasn't sitting in the chair said, "Friends, assassins, bitch." They were looking at a bunch of TVs that showed pictures and graphs. Many of the pictures were of a man with blonde hair and blood red eyes. Another figure that looked and sounded like a woman said, "Fuck you too." As you can see here, Ryu Yokaze deaths are coming in far below projections. You know the expectations built up here are not quite meeting said expectations. As I saw the strangest thing, it was on a bright sunny day and I was enjoying what life had to offer, and then I saw Ryu Yokaze walking around Takigakure, or was he skipping through Takigakure? Doesn't matter, I can never remember, with his head still on his shoulders. I thought to myself, that can't be, he should be dead, but then I thought, maybe it's someone wearing Ryu's Yokaze's face. Said the man wryly, still gazing at the TV screens, speaking with a light-hearted tone. The man said, "We're really going to have to turn this around because you see that clock." All the figures turned their heads to watch the clock's hands move to different numbers. That clock represents the amount of time Ryu has been enjoying his life. And I can tell you this, he's done some very naughty things that his mother wouldn't be proud of. Then the figure turned on the light, which let everyone see the figures. One of the people who was a woman among them. She was thin and cute, and she looked young. Her blonde hair was slicked back, and 2 long strands were styled into antennae that pointed backwards. She looked like she was in her early 20s. Her eyes were bright green, and she had a light layer of lipstick on them. She had an hourglass figure that most women would kill for, and it would make men drool. She walked around in black high Heeled shoes and black opera gloves with spikes on the knuckles. Her leather pants were skin tight. She wore a leather bikini under her Kumogakure flak jacket and had a tattoo of the kanji character for violence on her chest. She also had a spiked choker chain around her neck. Name of this person was Ninfu Boruto. Another was a tall, thin man with bright red hair that was shoulder length and styled into spikes that were pulled back. He had a widow's peak and small eyebrows. She has bright emerald green eyes and a reverse teardrop tattoo under each eye. He wore a Sanagakure flak jacket, but it didn't have shoulder pads or a collar. He wore red ninja sandals and pants that were too big and drooped in the back. He also had an orange sash around his waist, an orange jacket over his flak jacket, a ragged yellow scarf with dark yellow stripes around his neck, and red wrist warmers. His name was Yakedo. One of them was a huge man who was easily the tallest person in the room. He was unbelievably tall, 6 feet 8 inches, making him look like a giant to anyone who saw him. He wore a black leather jacket that fit him well while still showing off his muscles. He wore black pants, big black boots, leather gloves, and a mask over his face because he was afraid of being seen. The mask was skin tight and had white markings on it. Under the mask, he looked very strong and angular, with a square chin, a straight nose, and sharp cheekbones. He had blue eyes, a small eyebrow, and auburn hair that was pulled back into strange, unkempt spikes. This person, whose name was only Hametsu, was a missing nin in the bingo books because he killed his friends. One of the other men was tall and had platinum blonde hair that was styled with 2 long bangs that framed his face. He wore glasses and had big, bright green eyes. He was wearing the flak jacket of Hoshigakure, which is one of the world's smallest and weakest villages.
They call their leader the Hoshikage, which is just a formality because they don't have a real cage and never will.
His feet were bare and he wore a long white lab coat with a flower pinned to the lapel. This guy was just known as Otaku. And the last person in the room looked like they were the youngest and smallest. He had bright aqua eyes, but you could only see the left one because the right one was hidden by a long, layered bang. His hair was steel blue, and the bang on the right side of his face reached his chin. On the left side of his face, the bangs were shorter and didn't cover his eyes. He was dressed in a Takigakure flak jacket with a hood, arm warmers that reached his elbows, jeans, and sandals. Out of all of them, he looked the most bored. His name was Jakunin Furui.
The person in front of the TVs was a man with beautiful features, but his face was so girly that he could have been mistaken for a girl.
His hair was pink and ruffled and fell to his shoulders. He had blue eyes. At the moment, he was wearing a green shirt with short sleeves and a pink sash around his waist. His black gloves were stained with pink, and a lapel went over both of his legs. He wore simple ninja sandals and a Konoha headband on his forehead. He had a flower tattoo that went all the way up his right arm. The person in the room was one of the most dangerous. His name was Toge Bushu. Now, as you know, we've all come together to fight one enemy. He's already down, Sogeki and Marodi, Toge said as he walked up to the table and ate a piece of fruitcake. Everyone was a little on edge around the man with pink hair, and their moods were bad as they watched him eat the cake. This fruitcake is delicious. Toge turned to Otaku, the man in the room with the glasses, and said, now we really need to straighten things out. And when I mean we, I mean you. You see, my little birds have whispered in my ear about you doing nothing at all. You haven't even seen Ryu and have done very little to help with our crusade, as you may call it. Well, the chances of me meeting Ryu would go up if I watched his movements and analyzed his steps, Otaku said nervously, fidgeting with his glasses a bit when he saw the man with pink hair. I should be able to come up with a way to restrain Ryu. That would be the most helpful thing to do. I could come up with a way to specifically. But Toge cut him off with a sneer. Toge got close to Otaku's face and held the kunai to his throat, ready to slit it. You see, Otaku? I'm the guy with the money and the kunai, he said.
Let his blood stain the floor.
Then Toge moved away from Otaku and set his kunai in order. You see, when Danzo hires you to kill Ryu Yokazi, you shut the fuck up and kill Ryu Yokazi. Now then, do you have anything else to contribute? Otaku shook his head and felt sweat run down his neck at Toge's dangerous aura. He had never met a man who could be as calm as an ocean and as dangerous as a storm at the same time. People didn't mess around with Toge Bushu very easily. But he had no idea that Toge's question was a real one. As he pushed Otaku's chair out of a window and onto the streets of Omegakure, the man with pink hair said, "I didn't think so." Otaku screamed all the way to his death, and as he hit the ground, many people screaming in shock and fear at what they had just seen. A man's bones and body parts were lying on the ground, with his skin showing bones and his skull crushed so that blood and brain matter covered the ground. In a different part of Omegakure, Pain was standing above the village and watching everything that was going on. He used his perceptive rain to sense a disturbance to the east. When he turned his head, he could tell that someone was falling to the ground. Then he lost his chakra signature completely, which meant he was dead. The Akatsuki leader narrowed his eyes as he watched what was going on. He would have to look into it later. Back at the base, Toge was enjoying the fruitcake and wasn't upset about what he had just done. But everyone else was nervously sweating and biting their lips because they were afraid of the man. "Well, like I said, this fruitcake is really tasty." "Who brought it?" asked the man with pink hair, and the giant in the mask raised his hand to answer. "And thank you for that. Does anyone want a piece?" Toge asked as he waved his hands around while he waited for someone to answer. "No." "Too bad, well then more for me." Toge turned back to the TV screens and said, "Now go out there and kill Ryu Yokazi. It's not that hard. Take the door on your left on the way out, and don't touch anything. Danzo. Sama likes to keep his bases clean." Toge told Yakedo, Ninfu, and Jakunin to leave the room, so they did. But Hametsu stayed firmly in his seat, crossed his arms, and just stared at Toge. He didn't show any signs of fear or intimidation. The only person in the room who wasn't scared of the man with pink hair or bothered by his cruel side was Hametsu. He turned to Hametsu and asked, "Well, are you going anywhere?" Hametsu kept staring at him. At that moment, Hametsu got up from the chair and said, "No, he's coming for you now. When he gets here, I'll bring you his body." Toge just smiled at the huge man. "Now you sit down and wait," Hametsu said, looking irritated as he pushed Toge into a chair. Toge crossed his legs and arms and said, "This will be fun." Hametsu went to the hole in the window and looked out over it, taking in a wide view of the village. At night in Takigakure, the rivers, streams, and waterfalls were full of water. Standing tall and proud in the middle of the village was a big tree. Not much light got through the tree, but that didn't matter because lanterns were being thrown into the air. That's when lanterns would fly into the air and fill the village with their light. It was around this time that a pretty woman with blue hair wore a flowery blue kimono and a paper flower in her hair. She also had blue hair clips that looked like flowers on them. She was going to the docks to meet her partner, who was already there. Since she had never done anything like this before, she was a little nervous. This could have been a date, but it didn't feel like one. She had sparkling amber eyes that stood out in the dark. As her vision got better, she saw the man who was waiting for her. He was a handsome blonde in a black cloak. His glowing red eyes in the lights on the dock made him almost impossible to see. When Naruto saw Konan, he said, "You made it." His eyes were shocked by what he saw when he looked at her. She was wearing a beautiful kimono that she had brought just for the event. It fit her perfectly, showing off her almost perfect curves and assets. She didn't look at all like he thought she would. There was a calmness about her that made him feel odd. Was Konan standing in front of this angel? He came back to reality when he took her hand and led her into the gondola. It was strange because when they first met, she wouldn't have let him do that because she thought she was independent and didn't need any help. There was a difference between them that they might not have noticed. They changed each other in ways that might not have needed words. As Konan sat down in the gondola, she noticed that there were 2 lanterns on either side of Ryu. She raised an eyebrow and thought about the lanterns, but she chose not to say anything because she wanted to keep the conversation light. She knew the blonde had a plan, and she didn't think lanterns could hurt anyone. Naruto grabbed the gondola's oars and began rowing it out into the water of Takigakure. Silently and gracefully, they moved through the water without disturbing any life that was hiding below, like the fish. People were getting ready to light their lanterns for the festival and have fun tonight as she watched them gather on the shore of the water. She knew what the lanterns were for. She thought she remembered Ryu saying that festivals were pointless, but it's possible that he had grown up and lost his temper. Naruto wouldn't know they were there for a while because the lake was so big and they were moving so fast. She fell asleep with a smile on her face. She was asleep when she felt a small push that woke her up. She looked up and saw her blonde partner looking at her. Another smile came to her face when she saw his, and she quickly got over being sleepy. "So tell me, why did you choose this night to kidnap me?" Conan asked with a small smile at her unexpected cheekiness. In return, Naruto only smiled. "I don't know, I just felt like I didn't want to be alone. I wanted to share this experience with someone," the blonde said, struggling to find the right words. He looked out into the water and saw people setting up their lanterns for the festival. "As I walked around the village, I heard stories about people taking others out to the lake to spend time with people they care about. You know, I'm not great at expressing how I feel with my body or words, but this is just a way for me to say that I care about you," Naruto said without a forced smile, which Conan may have known wasn't real. "I have only felt this way for one other, and when they left I felt like there was nobody who could fill the void, until that is you came." Conan's eyes seemed to shine even brighter at her partner's awkward words. After that, she saw Naruto give her one of the lanterns and slowly put it in her hands. "Well, thanks for the words and lantern, but what are you going to do with it?" Conan asked with a smile. Naruto pointed his finger and a small spark of fire appeared. He then put his hand inside his lantern and lit it, making it shine brightly at night. The flames flared through the paper. "Well, they say that if you close your eyes and hold a lantern, you'll see what's important to you. I don't know if it's true, but..." He stopped talking as he looked into the lantern. Then he waved for Conan to give him hers, and he lit her lantern right away too. Conan told Naruto, "Just close your eyes." Naruto agreed. Both of them closed their eyes, and all they could see was darkness. They were both curious about what they would see, Conan more so than Naruto, who was still not sure what was going on. So he sat there with the lantern in his hand. He did nothing but sit in the boat with the lantern in his hand for minutes. He was sitting there waiting for something to say something to him, but he couldn't feel anything. Not the wind on his face, not the smell of the lake. But there was no picture, sign, symbol, or path that he could see. He just sat there looking blank. Though it was stupid of him to give in to hope, he did. Hope was so strong that not even he could understand it. He only wanted to find something important to him, but all he could see was nothing. There was despair in his mind that made him not want to give up hope. It was itching and twitching, and he couldn't get rid of it. He was so stupid that he thought what he was doing was wrong. A better answer then came along. He didn't care about that much. He opened his eyes and saw Conan smiling sweetly while her eyes were still closed. That was all the proof he needed that he wasn't thinking about anything important. He cared about Conan, but not as much as Madara. Was she important to him? Did she care about what she was going through? Did he spend his whole life without a goal? Was he there with anything important to him? He didn't have anything he really wanted or cared about. What was the most important thing to him? He thought at first that he would see infinite Tsukuyomi, the eye of the moon plan, and that was important to him. But was everything he thought wrong?
Was seeing infinite Tsukuyomi that important to him, or wasn't it?
Just what was he trying to achieve by doing something that wasn't important to him? Why did he do the things he did? For something he didn't think was important. Why did he want something so badly? Why did he need it? He looked up at Conan again and couldn't help but wonder what she was seeing. I guess the old woman was right. When you hold the lantern, you see the most important thing for you. He could see and feel Conan's dream and what was important to her. The thing she cared about most would only make her happy. If what she was seeing made her happy, then all he could want was for her to be happy. Seeing her smile made him feel like he was on cloud 9. It wasn't a fake or forced smile to get out of a tough situation. It was a real smile that came naturally and wasn't planned. But then he remembered that he felt something. At first, he thought it was all in his head, but it was as real as the gondola he was sitting on and his heart beating. While Naruto wasn't looking, his Sharingan eyes started to change into his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. Soon, his eyes started to bleed, and the balls in them started twitching wildly and violently, going back and forth so fast that it almost looked like he was in a harsh trance. He was shaking and bleeding more and more rapidly, and his cheeks were stained with blood every second. He was breathing hard, and the pain he was feeling was worse than anything he had ever felt. His whole body was shaking from the stress, and his eyes turned bloodshot and bright red all over. And then it stopped. All of a sudden, his eyes stopped moving, his body stopped shaking, and his eyes stopped bleeding. Then he grabbed the sides of his head. His eyes were wide and he was sweating. What? That can't be. How? Naruto thought as he had about 56 questions in his head. Then, he used the sleeve of his cloak, which was dipped in red liquid that sparkled in the light, to wipe off the blood on his cheeks. Then he turned to the side of the gondola and dipped his gloved hand into the water. He wiped away any blood while his eyes went back to normal, not so bloodshot and looking like his normal Sharingan. He also used the water to wipe his sleeve, which got him wet and got rid of the blood. But I think he should not have done that if I were him. He closed his eyes and grabbed his lantern again. He had to find out if it was true. He saw it, the thing that was most important to him. It was soft, gentle, sad, with a hint of nostalgia, but it also had a loving grace that very few things in the world had. He jerked awake from the image in his head, and he looked shocked. Was what he saw real? He could still make sense of those images, which made him wonder what they were. They felt like they belonged to someone from a different world, and there were other images in the group. Putting the lantern to the side, he put his face in his hands and thought about what had just happened to him. Konan, on the other hand, was still enjoying her dream. Fire. That was all Naruto could remember, fire. And there was someone walking through it who wasn't burned, a woman, not a man. In the lantern, he saw that. He knew it was. I guess. When Konan slowly opened her eyes, she saw something that could make anyone happy. When Konan opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was Ryu with his face in his hands. She knew that the blonde shinobi was upset, but she couldn't tell what. She could tell that something wasn't right because he wasn't moving or acting normally. Konan moved closer to the man and cupped his right cheek with her hand because she didn't think words could comfort him. Instead of reflexively brushing off her attempts to comfort him, he grabbed her hand tightly and eased into it, accepting her attempts to comfort him. He closed his eyes as he felt her soft, warm, and bright hand against his cheek. He didn't know what to think or feel about what he had seen, if he could feel anything at all. Because he didn't understand it, he felt like his mind had shut down. He knew only a few things for sure, like the woman whose warm hand was on his face and the hand itself. At that moment, people in Tokigakure were throwing lanterns into the lake, making a peaceful atmosphere with small lights all around them. Some people would wish that this moment would last forever, and Naruto did too. The magical setting was calming him down, and his neutral aura was slowly fading away as he looked out at the lanterns and Konan's hand on his cheek. What he had seen made him doubt everything he was trying to do and achieve. Each picture he saw was perfect, and he could remember them all like they were his best memories. That woman, Naruto thought. His mind was like a maze of thoughts, and the woman in front of him made him feel something. He didn't understand how people felt, which almost made him want to freak out. But when Konan dropped the shield she had built around herself and showed herself to him, she was everything he wanted in a person. This made her the most annoying person in the world sometimes, even though he would never act that way. The woman he had been spending time with was very mysterious. In their small moments together, he had seen her grow and overcome herself. She was always strong, no matter what happened, but she loved the small moments when he went out of his way to help her, comforted her when she was upset, and got her things she couldn't get. She was grateful for it. Now, she was the one making him feel better. When he looked her in the eyes, he didn't see any anger or irritation. She only cared about him and his well-being, but there was something else in her eyes, a warmth he hadn't seen anywhere else, not even in people who said they cared about him. He didn't know what it was, but he wished that everyone in Konoha had looked at him that way. He moved closer to the woman in front of him, as if his body were doing it on its own. Konan's body couldn't do anything about it. All she could do was stare as the man got closer. She could feel his warm breath on her face, and his eyes, which changed from blood red to a beautiful blue, drew her closer to him. The lanterns in the sky and on the water matched the happiness of the two people and added just the right amount of light to make the scene romantic. Finally, they pressed their lips together, and as they enjoyed the taste of each other's lips, their eyes closed instantly. They then gave each other a full kiss back. Naruto's hand was still on Konan's cheek, and she ran her free hand along the blonde man's chest to feel the hard muscle under the black cloak. He ran his hands across her body, putting one on the small of her back and the other on her cheek. It was a slow, soft kiss. The thing they did was a simple sign of how they felt, or was it lust? For now, it didn't matter because they were just enjoying their sexy kiss. But it didn't last long because Konan's baser desires were coursing through her. Conan took the blonde man's lower lip in her mouth and started to gently suckle on it. This made the blonde moan in a low voice. He learned how to fight off all kinds of pain, that pleasure was a whole other story for him. His hands didn't stay still. They started to wrap around the woman's body, slowly making their way to her bottom. He then grabbed her buttocks, which made her gasp a little. She was then lifted up and firmly placed on her partner's lap, where she could feel the growing, big bulge in his pants prodding her in certain places. Naruto then bit her neck softly, making her moan softly at the lightning-like touches. At the same time, she ran her fingers through his golden hair and massaged his scalp. Then, with her fingers, she felt the soft fabric of the bandages that were holding his spiky ponytail in place. She gently tugged on the bandages until they let go of his wild mane of hair, making him look more evil. She was so filled with lust over the man's actions that she couldn't think straight or figure out what was going on besides the fleeting and loving feelings she was having. Then she felt the sash that was around her waist and holding her kimono in place come loose. Then her breasts popped out, letting everyone see how beautiful they were. She could feel the cold air touching her skin, which made her feel alive. Her mind was foggy, and she couldn't make clear thoughts. She did have one thought, though, of a man with orange hair and brown eyes. Her mind was responding to what was going on. The blonde man, Naruto Uzumaki, was about to take off her clothes. Yes, she was about to have sex with Naruto Uzumaki. She pushed away from him before he could do the deed because her sense of reason told her to. When Naruto felt his partner's warmth leave him, he opened his eyes and saw Conan fixing her kimono with her back to him. He couldn't see her face, but he could feel the frown on it. He ran his hand through his hair again and could feel the stray hairs hanging off of his shoulders. At the moment, he was scolding himself in his mind for giving in to such a thing, but the images he saw made him long for them so much that he felt like a fool. The intensity of the images caught him off guard. But really, Conan, she was the most annoying person in the world because just being around her made him feel things he thought he had lost, even if they were small. It was sickening and joyful at the same time, and her actions gave him a rush he had never felt before. It wasn't lust, it was something deeper. It was like a tsunami had hit him, and he wanted to relive that feeling. Conan didn't know what to do. She felt like she was looking at Naruto and Yahiko, which made her miss her love for Yahiko and her desire for him. She couldn't explain how she was feeling. She had no words for it. Her only wish at this moment was to be locked up and never come out again. After looking at Conan for a second, Naruto said, "Let's not talk about this. I doubt words will help in this situation." Conan nodded and then looked back over the water, where he saw bubbles rising to the surface, which made him raise an eyebrow. Before anyone could say or do anything, something came out of the water to their right. When Conan turned her head, she saw the giant eel that Naruto and Hidan had fought a few days before. Naruto just looked at it with a bored face. Even though the eel didn't look much different from before, its face was badly scarred from Naruto and Hidan's attacks. When Naruto wiped the blood off his face with his sleeve in water, the smell of blood drew it in. It roared with anger and rage, and its eyes showed that it was hungry. Then it charged at the two, focusing on the blonde it was trying to eat. The people of Taki were having a good time at the celebrations when they heard something crash against the shore. At that moment, people were running around trying to find the source of the crash. They saw the dead body of the unagi, the giant eel that had been a problem in their water since the village was founded. It was lying on the ground with a dead look in its eyes. People talked about the people who could have hurt the unagi in that way, while others quietly cheered when the eel died. Something was prodding and sticking out from inside its neck before a black blade pierced its skin and quickly cut off the eel's head. The person who was stuck inside stumbled out, covered in saliva, stomach fluids, and other bad smells. Someone named Ryu Yokazi was there. Their bright hair had a light, you don't want to know, shine to it. Naruto asked as he watched the people who were covering their noses to avoid the smell of the eel's insides, is this the right time to give a cheesy one? Liner? In the Hidden Leaf Village, it was spring, which usually meant resting and recovering because summer was coming up. The wild green and wood-brown trees and leaves that lined the village were now glowing, enchanting, and beautiful. Spring meant that life and fun were on the way, and people were getting ready for the summer because they could already feel its effects, mostly warm weather and soft wi. There was economic growth and plenty in the Leaf Village that they hadn't felt in a long time, not since the time of Minato Namikaze, the Yondaime Hokage. Kids were yelling and screaming with pure joy as they rolled around and jumped into piles and mounds of fragile and soft flowers. The adults were stocking up on summer clothes like shirts and loose pants, as well as buying warm food that would help them on their journeys later on. Caravans carrying food and money to help Konoha were moving through the streets, and their drivers were smiling big at how happy everyone was. On the other hand, today was a big day. Like the rest of the world, Konoha was celebrating the Take-Ki, Bamboo Tree, Festival. No one knew where all these festivals came from, but every day there was a reason to party. Maybe it was a way for people to forget about the growing hatred in the world, their worries, and their past. As I write this, Tsunade was standing outside her village and looking over it with her brown eyes. She was looking at every part of it, almost like a predator looking for prey. Not only was today a day for celebration and fun, but a very important person, VIP, was coming to Konoha to do business with the village. Tsunade didn't have time to entertain the delegate because she had to keep order because today was the day most people would get drunk and act crazy. Besides that sad anniversary, today was the day people would celebrate the most. At that moment, she was thinking about how to best handle the situation. The delegate was a man with a lot of political power. He was close to the Fire Daimyo and wanted everything to go smoothly. Even though Konoha was an independent organization, they still worked for the Daimyo of the Land of Fire. If the delegate only criticizes or says something briefly, it could make or break Konoha in the long run. Even though he always wanted what was best for Konoha in the Land of Fire, there was still reason to be careful, among other things. Tsunade had already done something and had asked someone to meet her at the Hokage office. She knew she could trust the person who walked through the door with the delegate. Then she heard a knock on her door. She let the person in while keeping a close eye on the village. When she turned around, she saw Sakura Haruno, her apprentice, standing there in her everyday clothes. She had a curious look on her face as well. Sakura stood in the middle of the office with her teacher's critical eye on her and said, "You called for me, Tsunade." Sama. When Tsunade had that look in her eyes, Sakura knew she was going to go on a small adventure with someone important. She always wondered why, out of all the boys in the village, she was picked to be the poster boy. Plus, she wanted to hang out with Ino so she could enjoy the festival. She had to do something important, though, and sometimes she just felt like a servant. Yes, Sakura, as you know, the Take-Ki festival is about to start in a few hours. While I apologize in advance for taking away your time, something has come up that requires my attention. Unfortunately, my attention is rather valuable and is currently focused on something, maybe more important," said Tsunade as she sat in her seat, put her arms under her bust. Sakura said, "Please, Tsunade. Sama, you can't do this. Today is my day off, and I want to live my life a little, unlike you who doesn't have much to live." Tsunade's eyes went dark because Sakura had just broken the village's most important rule: never talk about Tsunade's age. She had to quickly calm down the angry woman in front of her, and she had to be careful about what she thought next so she wouldn't end up in the hospital or hurt herself. Training in punishment. Sakura rubbed the back of her head in frustration and said, "Sorry." After letting out a sigh, Tsunade put on a serious face.
Sakura, today, I received a letter from the Fire Daimyo who wanted to discuss the Land of Fire and trade agreements with Konoha. Seeing as how he couldn't make it himself, he has sent a delegate to speak with us on his behalf.
Tsunade recalled what she was told. The man in question shall be arriving shortly. Not only is he a powerful politician and advisor to the Fire Daimyo, but he has also made vast contributions to the welfare of the Land of Fire and its citizens. I'm sure you've heard of him, Inze Hosoku. As Sakura was shocked, she asked, "Inze Hosoku? You mean the diplomat who ended the conflict between the Land of Spring and the Land of Fire through peaceful negotiations and trade, as well as the sole beneficiary of the citizen uprising stabilization?" The man was well known in the Land of Fire because of how kind and humble he was. People there already liked and trusted him. Even though Sakura had never met the man, she had a mental picture of an old man with a grandfatherly glow around him. You will be escorting and protecting Inze until he leaves for the Land of Fire capital again, although I don't know what the Fire Daimyo wants, but if it involves Inze I can only assume that it's nothing but good for Konoha and the Land of Fire in general. Also try to cater to his needs, take him to some tea shops, I heard he loves tea. Can I trust you to do this? Asked Tsunade, and Sakura replied happily. Also, don't comment on his hands or feet. Then, from outside the door, they heard clinking that sounded like metal hitting metal. Then, from inside the door, they heard a knock that sounded like metal hitting wood. Tsunade let the person in, and Sakura saw someone she couldn't picture. He was tall, even taller than her. He had an angular face with narrow eyes that were a little round. He had spiky chin, length, caramel brown hair, sandy brown eyes, and light skin. He was wearing a white kimono with a black trim and a black obi that hung loosely on his side with a wavy mist pattern on the trim. He hid his hands in his sleeves in a respectful way, and he was very handsome, which wasn't what Sakura expected. Inze bowed to the older woman and said, "Hokage Sama, it's a pleasure to meet you again since your last visit to the capital." When Tsunade saw Inze, she bowed her head and said, "Nice to see you too. Sakura, allow me to formally introduce you to you, Inze Hosoku." The man had a kind smile on his face that would probably make any girl fall madly in love with him, Sakura thought. "Nice to meet you, Hosoku Sama," Sakura said as she extended her hand for him to shake. The man flinched a little at the gesture, but then he got himself together and took his right hand out of his robe, which made Sakura gasp. His right hand shocked her the most. It was covered in a black metal glove with 3-inch long, straight talons on the tips of his fingers and thumb. The metal was slapdashly put together with bars of metal attached to sharp cables that went around his hand, though you could barely see the cable through all the chunks of black metal that were attached to it. Around his fingers and wrists were black rings of metal that went around the fingers and wrists. If you looked past the metal and... When Inze saw how shocked she looked, he just pulled his hand back into his robes and bowed his head a little. Sakura then looked down at his feet and saw about the same thing. He had 4-inch long, straight black metal talons on his toes, as well as cables with black metal sheets on them and black rings on his toes and around his ankles. He also had horrible burn marks on his feet. She was interested in what the man had done to deserve such a punishment. "Really sorry," Sakura said, "forgive me, Hosoku Sama." She then bowed her head a little in response. "It doesn't matter much, and please call me Inze." "I don't like honorifics," Inze said with a smile while scratching his head a little with his metal talons. He then looked at Tsunade with a slightly less happy face. "Hokage Sama, when would you like to discuss the terms and agreements, as I can tell you have your hands pretty full with work. So it's best that I get out of your hair." "That would be great, Sakura. Please show Inze around the village, take him to lunch, or show him some interesting places," Tsunade said as she pulled out a pen and began writing on her papers and notes. Sakura smiled and said, "Yes, Tsunade Sama, if you would follow me, Inze." The brown-haired man did, and Sakura smiled back, wanting to enjoy the village's sights and sounds a little more. So, Sakura and Inze had been walking around the village for the past half hour, taking in all the silly games and entertainment booths where stuffed animals of all shapes and sizes were given to winners while those who didn't win had to walk away empty-handed and frowning. Kids were running around with their friends and parents, determined to enjoy the day while it lasted, while Inze just looked around a bit. "For a while, I traveled the world, eager to see the sights that were there. I wanted to learn about the cultures, traditions, and fasting times of the people of other countries. I also wanted to know what they did with their days on Earth and how they would spend or curse them, depending on your point of view. I wanted to figure out the mysteries of the human spirit and how people could find the strength to keep living," Inze Sudden said. Sakura said with a little less smile after her last two words, "It must have been fun seeing the world instead of being stuck in a cage like a bird. Sometimes I just want to enjoy the finer things in life, the simpler things, with someone else. So what did you discover on this so great pilgrimage of yours?" Inze laughed at how interested she was and was glad she asked. Few people were interested in hearing about his adventures, and those who did only cared if they could make money from them. He was naturally interested in everything around him. He called himself a man of the earth, and he treated all living things as if they were equal to him. She said, "Well, I found the strangest thing, something no one would ever expect from travels like mine. It was truly awe-inspiring. When I traveled the nations, I discovered that the other nations were not so different from ours." This made Sakura raise both eyebrows. She was expecting him to say something like riches or glory, but that wasn't what he said. "Before you ask how something like that could be, take a good look around you," Inze told Sakura as he walked along the path. The metal on his feet kept clinking. As told, the girl with pink hair turned her head in several directions. All she could see were people having fun at the celebrations and other events. She could see their smiles, and the sun was beating down on them. Today was one of the few days in Konoha's history when the sky was clear and it was sunny. She had to agree that it was better than all the bad news she was used to hearing. Still, she couldn't figure out what Inze meant. Sakura said, "I'm sorry, but I don't understand what you're referring to." She wasn't sure what the delegate was talking about because he seemed to be talking nonsense and maybe even bit crazy. "Are you familiar with the works of Guru Lagima?" Inze asked Sakura as he looked over at her. She just shook her head because she had never heard of the name or been familiar with it. Well, Guru Lagima was a renowned guru and poet, who lived nearly 300 years ago. He was particularly famous for his sheer wisdom, foresight and teachings. He usually portrayed his messages through his poetry and passed on his teachings to his numerous students. His writing was so influential that it survived the worst of the era of warring states. Although I am saddened to say that his words are now seen and dismissed as nothing more than children's stories, well, this may just be a children's story, as they say he discovered the secret of weightlessness and became untethered from the earth for the final 40 years of his life. And this has something to do with a children's story? Pouted Sakura, hoping that he would finish his story. Inze laughed, caught up in the moment. Sakura's eyes grew wide as Inze spoke. Like all great children's stories, it has truth in the myth. Lagima once wrote, "Instinct is a lie told by a fearful body, hoping to be wrong. And that means?" As Inze looked around again, he said, "It means that when you only base your expectations on what you see, you blind yourself to the possibilities of a new reality." But instead of seeing people having fun, he saw people who could do great things. To him, life was like the wind moving the waves of the ocean. He thought that an ant could one day move a mountain if given the chance. He saw the growth and potential in everyone. She was shocked by what he said and amazed by the man in front of her. When she looked at the people again, she saw potential in them too. She told the brown-haired man, "I had you wrong." He raised an eyebrow at her with thought. "I thought you were some prissy politician who was more concerned with the dirt on his shoe than people's feelings." It was Inze who said, "That's not someone I want to be in the future." But he looked behind Sakura and raised an eyebrow in anger and sadness. "But there are times when I question my beliefs when I see some jerk stuff an entire roast chicken in his mouth," Inze deadpanned. Sakura looked behind him and sighed as she saw what she saw. "Oh my god, Choji, I told you not to do that," yelled Ino, whose head had grown 10 times bigger, snarling at her always hungry teammate. While sitting on his behind and enjoying the tasty chicken in his mouth, Choji mooed, "Butts, ittssssssooo would. Troublesome." After that, Inze and Sakura left, but they didn't see the surprise on Ino's face as she saw her best friend leave with a hot guy. That guy was real stud material. "Is that Inze the wild dog? OMG Sakura, you lucky bee *tch, Ino thought as she looked at her friend. A few hours later, Sakura and Inze were on their way back to the Hokage Tower after having fun at the festival. The diplomat was going to talk to Tsunade about some private matters. It's true that Sakura said she had a good time. As soon as they got to the tower, Sakura spoke up with a question. Actually, she had 2 questions. Someone asked Inze, "Hey, why do people call you the carnivore?" Sakura asked out of the blue. He brought up his anger. "Well, when I'm at work, I tend to be, uncompromising and a bit aggressive. And let's just say that if you cross me, I'll chew you up and spit you out like an angry mother tiger from a fresh kill." This made Sakura's mind reset because of his sudden change in attitude. "Well, at least that's what my friends say." Sakura took a deep breath and cleared her mind before she asked the question. It felt like she was walking on glass. When Sakura saw that Inze's handsome face had turned down, she asked, "And what happened to your hands and feet?" She mentally scolded herself for asking such a personal and obviously hurtful question. He looked at the ground and said, "That's not something I can answer. It's best if you don't know." Sakura just winced at how stupid she was. She knew she shouldn't have asked him, but she did anyway. Damn it, she wasn't good at this kind of stuff. She also didn't know how to comfort or console him because they had only met a few hours before. When they got to the Hokage's office, Inze thanked them and called Tsunade over for a conversation that could make a difference in more than one life. The man with the metal tag and the woman who was known as a princess in her own village were sitting on 2 couches facing each other in a room. The politician, as usual, had his hands hidden under his robes to keep everyone from seeing what they were doing. On the other couch, Tsunade was sitting with one leg crossed over the other. She looked at the man in front of her with hazel eyes. On a sad day, Inze spoke with a monotone ring in his voice. There is no civility. No pleasantries. No goodwill. Only politics. It was written all over his face. Tsunade could see it, the stress of having to take care of an idiot. Inze was a hard worker, yes. Being lazy didn't help him get to where he was in politics. People looked up to him because he was determined and had a special charm that could inspire many. He did feel like she was her age when he got involved in politics, though. The Land of Fire, the once great country that many respected, is not what it once was. The halls of politicians and nobles are now filled with rapacious, squabbling, naive diplomats. There is no interest in the common good. I must be frank, Hokage. Sama, there is little chance that the daimyo will act upon his duties. The daimyo doesn't agree. He's been our biggest supporter since before the invasion 2 years ago, Tsunade said with a smile as she looked out over her village and enjoyed its growth and prosperity. A town that her grandfather built. Even though Inze had met the daimyo many times, he had never been impressed with him. He laughed as he said, if I may say so, the daimyo has very little power left, and what power he had before the invasion was little in retrospect. He is mired in baseless accusations of corruption, scandals, and general incompetence. The few allies he has left want to turn against him when they get the chance. The bureaucrats are in charge, and his advisors whisper orders to him, and he obeys like a lost puppy. But my village has been doing well. Every day we get stronger and make better shinobi than the last, Tsunade said to the man in the white robe. If he doesn't have much power left, then why is the strongest shinobi village getting even stronger? You fail to see that which is right in front of you, Haim. The only reason your village has been flourishing as it has is because the bureaucrats have allowed it. In fact, the daimyo himself has been taking several steps to ensure the Konoha is remaining strong. It's the one thing he's done right during his term. He's been levying greater amounts of tax payment and has been donating rather generously to the welfare of your village. But all power comes at a cost. Spoke Inze, his mood changing, becoming more serious. The people are starving, they will soon begin dropping dead like fish out of water, their frustrations are rising and I will not be able to quell their anger as I did the last time. The aristocracy are extorting all the wrongfully levied taxes and spending them on extravagances, the daimyo's wife Madame Shijimi being one of the key factors behind the economic decline because of her spendthrift fault. She spends more money hiring your ninja to chase that cat of hers than she does on the finest silks, jewels and pearls. Trade routes are being raided by bandits and are freely killing innocents and claiming food and water that the people sorely need. And don't ask why you were never told of this, is because the daimyo didn't want you getting involved, upsetting and fueling the mess he has made. He's more interested in his belongings than the welfare of his people. The two of them didn't know that someone was listening in on their conversation through the open door. The person had pink hair, so it wasn't hard to figure out who it belonged to. The Land of Fire is in the middle of a political and economic crisis right now. It won't be long before there is a revolution that overthrows the government and sets up a new one. The people will rise up, and other countries may try to take advantage of the situation. It all started with a single thought, Inze continued as Tsunade looked at him and asked him about it. Everybody wants to rule the world. Even though Tsunade raised an eyebrow, she had to agree that this was mostly true. Inze scratched his head and said, and it's true that I kind of want to rule the world. Tsunade asked in a jokey way, so what can we do to stop this so-called crisis? As Inze said, don't talk down to me, Tsunade. You may not care about the Land of Fire, but I do. I may know a thing or two about shinobi matters, but I know for sure that if the government falls, other countries will try to get political positions in it and have an effect on the country and Konoha.
This made Tsunade widen her eyes as she realized how bad things were.
The Fire Daimyo will lead this land into ruin, and the people will blame you for not taking action because of your passivity. They may turn on Konoha, as absolute power corrupts absolutely. I fear we may need a new leader who will not be tempted by proclamations of authority unless it's not too late for the daimyo to change course and wash away the dirt and grime he brought along with him. The coming months shall decide whether or not the daimyo is fit to rule this land with order or thrall this land into chaos. Just walk outside your walls and you will see what is happening. Children and civilians are starving, suffering and dying. The rates of unemployment are growing drastically with each second. Poverty is becoming a more adamant problem. It will be soon before riots start happening, and then what comes after shall be worse. Inze got up from his chair, brushed his robes, bowed, and said goodbye to Tsunade. That's when Tsunade told him to stop. He was about to grab the doorknob with his hand. What we are discussing may very well be labeled as treason by the wrong parties seeking power. Tsunade spoke with care. If you say this situation must be stabilized, then I can send one of my most trusted ninja to accompany you back to the capital and will act as an extension of myself. A delegate from Konoha. I'm putting my faith in you. Resolve this problem before it becomes out of hand. He said, this isn't treason. It's just an exchange of views. The fire daimyo doesn't know how to rule. He'll probably end up with his head on a spike and being paraded down the street. All we were talking about was a peaceful solution to the problem. Nothing else. I'll be leaving tomorrow. Send your delegate to me at the northern gate, where we'll split up for the capital. Inze turned the doorknob and saw himself outside, where he saw Sakura leaning again. It was her master's face that she saw when she turned her head. His eyes were blank. Pack your bags, you're going to the capital. In another place, two people were walking down a road toward a village known for its well-built roads. The two beings wore black cloaks with red clouds on them. One had hair as blue as the ocean and eyes that looked like amber, and the other had hair that had been in the sun and eyes that were ruby with black tomo inside them. Naruto Uzumaki played Ryu Yokaze, and the other person was his partner Conan. The two had not said a word to each other and had only looked at each other. At that moment, all they did together was walk along the road that led to their destination. They had been tense and uncomfortable with each other, and Conan remembered what happened on the gondola like it was yesterday. What she saw when she looked into the lantern was something she could only see in a dream. It felt so right. She had seen Yahiko, and it felt like he was there in real life. She opened her eyes to find him still there, with his wild orange hair and cute smile. She didn't know what she was doing. She just went with her gut. She was so happy she couldn't stop feeling good. She didn't want the moment to end. Everything was great in her life, and she wanted it to last forever. But then her mind caught up with her. After that, everything was over. She had no idea what Ryu was thinking when he did the same thing and went even further. Did he think she was someone else? Because he was sad about the state of the world at the time she saw him, she thought he was Yahiko. So that's what Ryu looked like to her, which is why she thought orange was yellow. She wasn't sure if she should feel bad about what she did or angry about what Rai would do to her. They would have to walk for a few more hours to get there, but Naruto could make that space. Time portal worked much faster. So she would leave him there until he wanted to talk again. That was the indicator. Since he wasn't using it, he had to walk and think about what he was thinking. While this was going on, Naruto was coming to terms with who he was. He was tired of everything. He was lost and confused about who he was no matter what he did. He thought he was losing more than just his emotions, more like his whole being. He killed two of his childhood friends without thinking twice, and he didn't feel bad about it. Even people who were at odds with each other feel bad when they kill each other, but he didn't. He felt a passion that had been buried for a long time when he kissed Conan. It was almost like it belonged to someone else. It was exciting to have all those thoughts and feelings going through his mind. He wanted it so badly that he thought the infinite Tsukuyomi was the only way to get it back. He almost forgot about it after that. After that, he didn't feel anything. What did he look like? That's why they kept walking without looking at or talking to each other. Nothing but silence. They were immediately called to Pain's tower when they got to a megacure. What did the leader of the Akatsuki want to talk about with the man with blonde hair? That is, to find out if the newest member had met the traitor. As Pain looked out over a megacure once more, he asked, "Were you successful?" He watched over the village like a tiger watching its territory, with his metal purple eyes fixed on the horizon and never moving or twitching. He could feel what the people in his village were doing. In the background, Ryu Yokaze and Conan were just listening to him with blank looks on their faces. Naruto answered straight out, "Yes." His red eyes never left the man in front of him. The blonde wasn't stupid. His master knew how to use the Rinnegan, so he knew the person in front of him was dead. Born from Nagato's chakra. Every time Naruto saw the man, he had to hold back a snort. He thought he was a god, but the person who first had his eyes was more than just a god. At the moment, though, it didn't matter. Someone was going around the world telling others about the Akatsuki's plans and secrets, and Naruto had a good idea of who it was. Pain said, "Then you should go catch him, if you can." His voice was smug and insulting without meaning to be. He didn't really like Yokazi, and he didn't like how close the man was to Conan. For one thing, he didn't trust Yokazi very much, so how could he trust him to protect his best friend? 2. He is good at his job, but it doesn't seem like he wants to make friends or at least work together. At least, that's how it looked. He couldn't be sure if it was true. 3rd, he wasn't sure what he wanted: money, Kakazu, religion, Hidan, art, Deidara and Sasori, or to do something for fun with hidden goals, Kisame. The man in front of him was like a puzzle, and Pain, like any child, wanted to put the puzzle together and find out everything about Ryu Yokazi. I can feel him here in the village. You already know what I'm going to do, so I'll be leaving now, Naruto said as he threw off the Akatsuki cloak and put on his usual black clothes. He turned to Conan as he was leaving and asked for the Shiromi Kirin. She opened the blade and gave it to him, but he told her he would return it later because he thought he would need it. While his form was moving away, Conan frowned slightly and thought about how distant he seemed and how neutral he seemed. He walked through the village in the dark, with the constant rain hitting him hard. He didn't seem to mind being cold, as each step made a squelching sound. No one was out on the streets, and if there were, they would be hobbling to get out of the rain, but Naruto kept walking as if nothing was wrong. The red eyes of the man walking were fixed on the path in front of him. Nothing else was important. The only sound he could hear was the splashing of water from the dark clouds above him. Not a light. He had so many ideas that he could hear voices. These weren't voices that would talk back to him, but voices from a story that was broken up. They were telling him things he didn't understand, but one voice belonged to a young girl, and he was carrying something from her that only a few people could understand or wish for, such as something from another world. When he closed his eyes, the world without memories came back to him in flashes. He had seen more than he should have, and it was eating away at him. But the images he saw looked so real that he might have thought they were real. Was it real, or was it more like an illusion or a memory? He could see a lot of things that other people couldn't, but the pictures he saw were real, and so were the things he felt. He saw a lot of things. He didn't know who he was or what he wanted, and the images made him question those things. Were they memories that he couldn't get back? Because he wasn't in any pain, he couldn't feel the Juinjutsu on his left arm, which was throbbing and changing color from black to red on a regular basis. It didn't glow in the dark room, though. He didn't pay attention to the pulsing in his arm that had been going on since the time he was on the lake of Takigakure. He just kept moving. The voices told him exactly what they meant. Something so simple. A creation born of ignorance. A being without purpose, you are. The secret place. Your voice. You left me. This time. I'll fight. Meet me at the place in between. The forgotten place. They're gathering. You are a nobody, non-existent. The third enemy. What took so long? Can we do it? Against that. You're heartless. I have come for you, my master. You are the source of all. Naruto. Naruto. Why? Metamorphosis. The 13th order. Sama, but why? Change. That which holds you back. What is this place? In between. Is this the answer you're looking for? You have no more use. This is the world's true form. Maybe my life meant nothing after all. A paradise with you. We'll go together, Naruto. I've been to see him. He looks just like you. Naruto said, everything is coming back to me, the true. But his speech stopped after the last word. He thought about all those words, some of which came from men and some from women. Something so simple came first, then, he looks just like you. He heard it like a bell in his head. It was so loud and thunderous that it was worse than the rain. He was soon taken out of his thoughts when he felt their presence. At least 60 of them, and each one had weak chakra levels above Chunin level, not even close to his tailed beast level chakra. They were trying to hide from him by making it look like they weren't there. He had to give them credit for something, though. They were trying to hide between them and him. However, he could see them through his red eyes as they climbed up the pipes and roofs of the industrialized village nearby. He stopped in front of a building that some people used as a hotel. It was still raining, and he gave them a small, sneaky smile as they finally showed up. They stood around him like statues, all 60 of them surrounding him from all sides and making a circle. Shaped empty space around him. They all had different masks on, but there was something about them that was different. Everyone wore black leather gloves and a short black jacket with red straps. Each of them wore a high collared shirt, black bands around their ankles, and ninja sandals. A tanto was slung over their shoulder. Naruto was very aware of the group that these puppets belonged to. There was a smell of their master on them that not even rain could wash away. Root, the part of Konoha's Anbu Black Ops that has been disbanded. Dan's secret police unit sent a cautious member to approach the blonde from his right side. Naruto didn't look at him, he just stared ahead and didn't do anything. There was a broken window in the evil, secret building of Togebushu and his partner Hametsu, and they were looking out of it. From their safe place, they watched the show. Well, isn't this the time when you... I don't know, kill him? Toge joked as he turned to look at his violent partner. No, Hametsu told Toge as he pushed him away and kept staring out over the rain. Shrouded village. Tigers wait for the right time to strike. They watch their prey first. So you wait. Naruto was still looking off into space when we got back to him. The root agent said, "Please come with us, Tekurufu." Naruto raised an eyebrow at him because he had never heard of a person named Tekurufu. At least it wasn't a name he had to remember for a reward. But what did the agent really mean? Naruto looked up at the sky and asked, "Tekurufu?" As the rain hit his face. "If you don't comply, we have been told to kill you," the root agent said as he stretched out his tentacles and got ready to fight Naruto, who wasn't the least bit scared of him. Before the agent could do anything, he fell to the ground, and blood started pouring out of his head. He also had a senbon in his left eye, which went through the eye hole in his mask and into his brain. It seemed like the blonde was already 2 steps ahead of them. He wasn't unprepared, and he wasn't alone. Many members of Root got their weapons ready to kill Naruto. Naruto took a stance and swung his right arm where the Tanbogiri showed up. He then swung his left arm where the Shiromikairan showed up. He then spun them both around, rubbing their metal against each other to make sparks, and took a stance ready for battle. The Root soldiers moved forward a few steps, while Naruto stood there with his swords drawn and ready to fight. It kept raining, covering the Root agents in cold water up to their bones. They stood there for a few minutes without doing anything, just watching the time go by. Because they had trained, they were sure they could kill the person they called Tekurufu. In that moment, Naruto stood still, his eyes never leaving the people in front of him. The 2 swords by his sides were wet from the rain, but you couldn't see a single sign of fear, nervousness, or doubt in his eyes. Now, everyone was waiting for one of the machines to destroy the other so that they could finish their job and move on. The rain stopped all of a sudden. And at that moment, the Root agents went into battle. One member tried to give up his life so that his teammates could see how skilled their opponent was. He quickly ran towards Naruto, who could feel him coming and, as he had been trained, acted without wasting any time. He cut the Root member in half with the Tanbogiri, killing him instantly and making his body scrape across the wet ground as a small amount of red blood dripped off the black sword and covered the Tanbogiri. 2 more members tried to attack the blonde with the goal of killing him. Naruto changed his grip on the Shiromikairan to a reverse grip, slashed one of the members across the chest to kill her, and then stabbed the other with the Tanbogiri. Naruto quickly and precisely kicked the white sword. Killed agent's body into a group of Root agents coming at him. The body knocked the Root agents to the ground. Then Naruto skillfully used the Tanbogiri to point the sword at a group of flying kunai that were coming at him, using the dead agent as a shield while the blade was still sticking out of the Root member. He put his foot on the man who was still holding on to his black blade and pushed him off. Naruto used his incredible skill to stab an agent coming in from behind with the Shiromikairan. He then flipped the man over and landed behind his back, where he stabbed the Tanbogiri into the man's back and threw him off the sword into another group coming at him, knocking them over like bowling pins. Naruto continued his defensive attack by slashing another agent down and killing him. The Shiromikairan then cut off another agent's foot, making him scream in pain at what had happened to him. But his screams didn't last long because Naruto spun around and pierced him with the Tanbogiri. The blonde then flipped over the dead body and sliced 2 members horizontally, killing them, before doing a split kick that sent the bodies flying away and in. Naruto cut another soldier across the stomach with his sword and then gave the man a simple kick that broke his teeth and skull. One soldier was cut down with an upward vertical cut, and another was kicked away, only to come back to the fight later. Naruto then spun around in the air and killed another Root agent who followed the storm of metal death without thinking. When the blonde hit the ground, the Sharingan's sharp eyes and ability to predict the future let them see 3 root members jump into the air to try a new strategy that might kill the blonde. When Naruto jumped after them, the 3 fighters kept slamming their weapons into each other. But it didn't help them because the Shiromikairan or the Tanbogiri broke their weapons into pieces or turned them into jigsaw puzzle pieces. When the 4 of them landed, Naruto jumped into the air again, but this time there were 7 root members chasing him. He quickly killed 3 of them by slashing them across the chests while they were still in the air, but he still had to deal with 4 others who were coming down to attack him from above. Without moving his muscles at all, he threw the Shiromikairan into the air, right past the root members. What they didn't see was the white blade bouncing around in the air and coming down on them, killing all 4 of them at once and then returning to Naruto's hand as if it had never been away. Again, Naruto was holding it in a backwards way. Now that things were getting serious, the kid gloves came off. The root agents started using jutsu against the blonde, lightning and fire jutsu that made the Akatsuki member think quickly on his feet. However, even though they were very disciplined, they still didn't have self-control, which Naruto took advantage of by killing their teammates accidentally with their jutsu. Friendly fire was a bitch after all. Naruto jumped and landed on a flight of stairs that led up to the hotel. He then watched with amusement as Danzo's little puppets ran around trying to get around him. He then looked up to the top of the hotel and saw a figure in a cloak standing on top of the tower with a blank look on his face. And out of the shadows came Itachi Uchiha. He looked down at Naruto with his red eyes, as if he were a holy messenger from God. Naruto didn't want his prey to get away, so he ran up the length of the tower at a speed that only a Sharingan could match. His sword scraped against the metal of the building, making sparks appear in his path, and root agents were following him. Naruto threw the Tanbogiri at Itachi, sending the black blade spinning toward the man with black hair. This made Itachi smile at the blonde. Itachi responded by jumping off the hotel roof and grabbing the Tanbogiri out of the air. He then quickly slid down the length of the hotel while holding the black blade ready to use. As the 2 Sharingan users got closer to each other, they didn't attack. Instead, they just walked by each other, giving each other blank looks. Itachi, meanwhile, cut off any root agents that were in his way and switched places with Naruto, who had been standing where Itachi had been just seconds before. As soon as the former Uchiha heir landed, he was surrounded by root agents. These agents were also sent to kill Itachi so he wouldn't talk about the horrible things that happened in the Leaf Village, especially the events that led to the Uchiha massacre. So Itachi started cutting up the people in front of him with fire jutsu and water jutsu that were easy to make from the ground's water and moisture. Killing at least 12 people without our anti-hero with golden hair getting in the way. Because he didn't want to let Itachi have his way, Naruto jumped back into the fight right away. But as planned, Itachi threw a kunai at Naruto, but the blonde blocked it with the Shiromikairan, grabbed it out of the air, and threw it back at Itachi. He dodged it by turning his head to the side, looking shocked and surprised. The kunai flew past the Uchiha and hit a root member behind the Sharingan wielder, cutting off some of Itachi's bangs that framed his face. Itachi charged at Naruto without thinking, and Naruto did the same thing to the root members, as if he didn't know whether they were friends or foes. Naruto and Itachi both tried to stab the other in the head, but when they saw the Sharingan moves, they both moved their heads to avoid being hit. This killed 2 root members who had been sneaking up behind them as well. At the same time, they tried to cut each other, but when they met, there was a loud crash of metal that could be heard all over the area. The Tanbogiri and the Shiromikairan were known as sister swords, which meant that when their metal touched, it lost its power. While Naruto was not looking, he stepped back a bit and pierced another root member. He then blocked another agent with the Shiromikairan while Itachi was busy with other things. Itachi saw that there was danger behind him and swung the Tanbogiri at Naruto, but Naruto dove under it, hitting a root agent and stabbing another root soldier. Itachi quickly saw that Naruto was distracted and pulled out a kunai, which he threw at the Shiromikairan's blade, making it fall out of Naruto's hand. This didn't bother or anger the blonde, though. He pretty much took it all in stride. Naruto then took a kunai out of one of his wrist seals and held it backwards. Then Aura rushed at a root member so quickly that the shinobi barely had time to react before Naruto slashed him across the side, killing him and leaving blood on the ground as he fell. Naruto wasn't done fighting yet. Another root agent tried to cut him off at the feet with his tanto, but Naruto jumped in the air and did a reverse roundhouse kick, hitting the agent in the head and breaking his neck. Naruto with the kunai B. And Naruto grabbed the Tanto out of the air and held it in a reverse grip in just 3 seconds. He blocked an attack from the Tonbogiri with his kunai, which cut the kunai in half. At the same time, he slashed Itachi in the side with his Tanto, all in 3 seconds. The blonde's back was to the Uchiha as he fell to the ground and grabbed his wound. Naruto stood there with his eyes closed, holding the bloody Tanto in one hand and the broken kunai in the other. He stooped a little to make room for them. When Naruto realized there were no more enemies around, he threw the Tanto and the broken kunai to the ground. They made a noise when they hit the hard ground, and Naruto opened his eyes to hear Itachi breathing shallowly. He finally found and beat the traitor. Itachi was on the ground, clutching at his wound. Naruto could feel it all around him. This wasn't genjutsu, it was real. He was also amazed at how well Madara had taught him because he beat Itachi, a genius who had the potential to be as good as the Yondaime, in just 3 seconds, which was something he could never have done before he met the old goat. Tobogiri and Shiromikairan were on the ground. He picked them up and sealed them in his wrist seals. Natsu said, "Let's go, Itachi. We have a lot to talk about." He grabbed Itachi by the collar of his Akatsuki cloak. Following this, Naruto turned on the Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan in his left eye and used Kamiyo-no-Yo, Sutepu no Shinigami, Steps of the Death God, to open a purple and black portal that led to a different place. Now that was over, Naruto dragged Itachi through the portal and into a small metal room with an octagonal shape and small rectangular windows that let just enough light through. There was a single bed with a not very soft mattress and an iron barred door that could only be opened with special chakra. Itachi looked almost dazed when Naruto threw him to the ground without any ceremony. Naruto then sat on the bed and watched Itachi from there. As Naruto looked at Itachi's bleeding body and took off his hood to show his golden hair, he said, "So, Itachi, at last I find you." Naruto didn't kill Itachi right away because the blonde thought he could still be used as a pawn. Itachi looked at the man with wide, now black eyes. He had seen that face before and knew it all too well. It was different in a few ways, but the resemblance was undeniable. Naruto.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.